All right, welcome back to the Imperial 80s. It is good to be with you, M2May. How are you doing today?
I'm alright, making it happen, fighting a good fight. It's a little like gloomy skies in New York. I don't know how it is in Philly, but we're
Yeah,
in that kind
same.
of like gloom sky, which I think fits for this movie.
It
Right?
does. Yeah, it does fit with this movie, and it also is like I think just a product of all these storms that have been going on in other places,
Yeah.
like in the South
Yeah.
and in the Midwest and so on. So, um, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
weather's
yeah.
crazy. I know there's World Cup here in Philly tonight, so like and probably up in your area as well. So that may get uh messed up by the thunderstorms
Wow.
tonight. So we'll see.
Okay, good thing I ain't heading downtown, man. I'm staying up here in Kingsbridge, so good thing I ain't heading down there. I've been trying to avoid even though I did go to the Knicks parade, I've been trying to avoid the massive sports fans. Even at the Knicks parade, I was in the back. So like I was like, I'm not even gonna kid myself to think I'm actually gonna enter. I'll make a dent in this.
Yeah. No, it's we went down. Lara Shihai was here this weekend, so we did
Yeah, yeah.
her book talk. I know she's coming up to New York
Yeah,
and
we'll
she's
be
going
at
to
Tuesday at
Baltimore
People's
and
Forum.
DC.
Yeah. Hmm.
Tuesday at People's Forum, and then she's
Yeah.
at Red Emma's in DC next Saturday, and I think somewhere in between there she's in DC too. So, and in New
Yeah.
Jersey too. I think she's doing something with Renee also. So, anyways, if you're along the East Coast, come out and see Lara and friends. And but we had a great night. But it was like it was wild just getting into the city and also just seeing how the city looks right now because you know, they for once Philly looks clean, which I guess is also probably related to the 250 whatever you call that, like the anniversary of the United States, right? Because that's a big deal in
Hmm.
Philly too. But yeah, it's weird. It doesn't look like itself and all of this for people, you know, for nothing, for like these little bubbles of whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of people in the city. All right, well, today, so yeah, so if you're joining us, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. It looks like Twitter is down right now, which is no major thing, but it does mean that fewer people are getting access to this conversation. So make sure to share it where you can. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you are not already, and make sure that other people know that this conversation is going on. And of course, check out all the episodes. We had a great episode last week. Shout out to Dr. Ball for coming through and doing
Hmm.
Beverly Hills Cop with us. That was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
And this one is going to be good. This is our second movie from John Carpenter, uh,
Hmm.
both of which are not like his most, and we could talk about some of this, not his most famous 80s movies, but very interesting ones. Um, and it's also the second movie. The other John Carpenter one we did so far is Prince of Darkness with Dylan Rodriguez,
Yeah.
which was a really great episode. And then for Stephen King, the other Stephen King one that we've done so far is The Running Man with
Right.
Hiram. Um, and this is interesting just because it's the only time that Carpenter worked on something King related, or vice versa. And obviously, they're both big, huge figures within the horror genre for books and films. King famously did not like this movie.
Hmm.
Thought it was. I think his quote was, "It was boring," which is worse
It's one
than
of the it's,
being.
it's one of the two it's one of the two adaptations that of his movies that he found to be boring.
Yeah. Well, did he also find Running Man to be boring? I mean, because he didn't like that either. I know the first one.
I forgot what the other one was. I think he said it like that, but I don't know if he named the other one, but maybe later. Like in the quotation
Yeah.
that I've seen, it was one of the two. So like I don't know if someone actually asked him what the second one was.
Yeah, and his claim was that uh, it's better for a movie to be bad than boring or something like that. And so it was like basically kind of a like the worst thing you could do to one of my books is make it boring, which I
Right.
don't think this movie's boring at all.
No.
I do think that it's not scary, which I think is an interesting thing. And I wonder a little bit if that's kind of what he meant. I also don't I read the book too as a kid. I also didn't think the book was scary. So it's not like
Mm,
I think it's hard to make a scary movie out of a book that's not scary. And I think there's a whole, question really of like, can you make a I think you probably could make a movie where a car is really scary. Um,
yeah.
having seen Backrooms recently and, like, how scary I found that movie to be despite it being, like, very mundane in terms of, like, what you're supposed to be afraid of. Um, but it's more about, like, the music and the pacing and all of that kinda stuff that would be needed to do that. But I don't think that interestingly, I don't think that King, when he wrote this book, was really trying to make it scary, and I don't think that, that's really Carpenter's main objective here either.
Well, he said
So
he
it
thought the script wasn't scary. I mean,
yeah.
we'll get into that in a minute. Like he said the script to him wasn't scary, and it was actually he said it was something that he did as a job.
Mhm.
Though I do think it's interesting the particular things that he changed in it, and I think King will probably never admit this, but I think it's one or two points that Carpenter changes from the book that probably pisses King off.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah, it's
which is a
quite
big thing
different.
with
Yeah,
authors and filmmakers. Like, there's like this always this thing
yeah.
with like people who have original material, and there's like an essential like storyline that a filmmaker or screenwriter changes or a studio changes, and they just get like fucking like fuck the movie completely.
Yeah. No, there are some significant differences, even though there's also a lot of
Hmm.
overlap between the 2. Um, so, yeah, so memories so interesting, like, I encountered both the book and the movie as a teenager, so not until the '90s. Um, and I read the book first. So, that was, you know, one thing. And I saw the movie with like my friends. Like it was like something that we watched on like HBO or whatever when it was playing. And I don't I mean, the book was interesting to me because one, I was not sophisticated enough in my analysis of the book or the film at that age to really kind of think too much about what types of messaging that either King or Carpenter were, or the scriptwriter for this, were looking to get across in terms of the kind of metaphors and symbolism of Christine. And so my reaction to the book as a kid, what as a teen, was the kind of toxic masculinity of it, was a kind of like, God, they say, pussy and the C word and all this a lot. And um and it's even more in the book than it is in the movie, but it's quite a bit in both. And but at the same time, like I was still probably at an age where there was a certain amount of like my own that and my own like teenage sexual frustration and all of that kind of stuff, where it was just weird to me how open they were, because usually that stuff is at least for me, was a little more bottled up, right? um and so that was the part that kind of stood out to me. And obviously the car, being supernatural and all of that was interesting. And but I didn't understand a lot of the like I really just kind of saw it as like a revenge film, through the sort of the car being the thing that takes out the revenge, right? And then obviously, and we'll get to the end. But so I didn't have a deep read on it, growing up. But I did enjoy the book on balance, despite things within it that like made me uncomfortable. And I'd say the movie to some extent too, although I think I just was into other stuff at that time. Like it wasn't like I didn't like the movie, um, but it wasn't one that I went back to a lot. So that's it for me.
So I have a question to ask you before I jump into mine. Did you grow up being a person who loved cars? Did you have like the boy, I want to have my car, or the cliche? Let me say the cliche boy. I don't want to say there's like an inherent thing of with boys, but like I want my car when I'm 16, the driver's license fascination.
Yes. I mean, like, so that's a very, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that part of it was just, yeah. I mean, like, for one, I grew up in the country. So like your mobility, it becomes like completely tethered to your parents for like a very long time. Like I could walk, I could like be dropped off, like I would hang out with friends and stuff like that, but like the ability to really go where I wanted and do what I wanted was totally, in a city it's a little different, right? Because once your family becomes accepting of like you can go out after dark, like you have access to a whole world of stuff kind of, right? But for us, there was always this dynamic of having to kind of like work through your parents. So we'll get to that when we get into the movies and how that's like portrayed through Arnie and so on. Um, but like that part, yes. And also the kids who were really cool, who had the girls that I wanted to have in high school, had really fucking awesome cars. Like, the big, like a big thing in Oregon were like those, was it like the Chevelles and the Eldorados? Like the cars, this is a funny thing. Like it basically could be like a low rider, right? But like it's a car that has the trunk, sort of like the original Cybertruck, but way cooler. Cybertrucks are so freaking dorky, but like, but the idea, right, of it's basically like a car body, but then the pickup back. This was like the ultimate, like, and I have like so many memories of the kids who had those cars and stuff like that, and just kids who had low riders and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Also, I think that is one of the things we'll talk about as we go through this era of growing up in the 80s and 90s and having that proximity to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where there were still these big muscle cars or these like cool, like gas guzzling cars, even if it was from like the late 70s, or once you get into the 80s, the cars get a little bit less cool, honestly. But like really a lot of those like 50, 60, 70s cars were not as old. Like nowadays, those things are like ancient. But like in the time span they're talking about in the movie, Christine is a 57, right? And the film starts in 78. So it's like, well, she's a 58, but I think, but it's a 57 is the year that she comes out, right? Um, so it's like 20 years, right? And I mean, we'll talk about all of this, but one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is like how when we grew up, we all thought of stuff from the 50s as if it was like ancient. But then when you think about it, it really wasn't, especially not as we understand time now as adults being in our mid 40s, that the proximity to that era was actually closer right now than like our kids in the 80s is, right? And so there's a there's a whole thing to kind of, I think, reconceptualize about time that everybody probably goes through as they grow up. But yeah, the car thing was big, and I do remember when I got my car, and I remember the process of like, failing my driver's license test the first time and having to re-get it. And then like when my friends started to get their license, which a couple of them did before me, even though I was older, but like that still was helpful because it was like then I could get rides with them, right? Which is something that you see in the beginning of this, and that being again much not as good as owning your own car or having your own car, but better than having to ride around with your parents or something. So yeah, those that absolutely is true.
So yeah, so I'll start with the car thing, then I'll go to the movie because I have a very different relationship with cars. And I know people say I grew up in New York City. I tell people this all the time. So people go make fun of me. But yeah, I think it's very relevant to this because in New York City, you have a couple of like really distinctly different things. One is the transit system, right? Just literally the trains. And I grew up right in the heart of like trains, uptown, took trains everywhere, right? So that was a big thing. The second thing is you can't get your license until you're 18 here. So the whole 16-year-old driver in school was something that just did not exist when I was growing up. Right. So whenever I saw movies or TV shows about like this 16-year-old thing, I would have a little bit of jealousy, but I was also kind of in like understood that like that would never be my reality. So everything was the train, right? And there was a way this wasn't for everybody, particularly people I think who lived in places like Queens, maybe who live like, you know, places like Corona, Cambria Heights. They have a different, not even past the train system who have to get on the bus. Even some people who live in like Woodside and things like that, they had a different relationship to cars. Some parts of Brooklyn, but like I grew up uptown. Like no one I knew, unless honestly they was dealing drugs or they were super rich, right? Were even thinking about cars. So there was a way when I first was introduced to this movie, it was like a weird thing that I wasn't particularly like even interested in. Like I remember seeing the poster at one of the like video houses that I was at, and I thought it was cool because it was like the flame thing, and I was like, "Oh, that looks cool." And actually, I did find it a little spooky. I was like, "What the fuck is this movie called Christine with a flaming ass car?" And I was like, "I'll watch it one day." But like I skipped it all through even through my teen years. I never saw it. It wasn't until I got to college where things like cars actually became a reality, because I actually was on a campus that was like situated. I went to Purchase, so people who know that campus, it's like situated in the middle of like Westchester. It's really hard to get off of it. It's like it's even working there now. Like it's really annoying. So it's like this thing. So like car access and car availability became this thing. And I remember, I don't know if it was my freshman or sophomore year, there was a guy that I knew who loved this movie. And there was another woman in my class who loved it. And they would watch this film like religiously. And they're like, you gotta, and I would talk about, and I started getting in the Carpenter, because I was already into the thing, already into Halloween. And then, you haven't seen Christine? And I was like, oh yeah, let me watch it. And I watched it with them, and I was like, oh yeah, this shit is bonkers. It's weird. And what I think intrigued me was, especially back then, I had this interest in like white suburbia, right? And like how white suburbia, you know, kind of like manifested itself through expression. So I'd be like, this is what the white suburban kids obsess over, right? And seeing the parallels, like definitely the whole like male obsession over women, which like is not just a suburbia thing, right? And or like the way, the kind of vulgar way that they kind of obsess, and like their sexual awakenings, who is available, but just like the differences, like how we would express it and how these corny white kids, if you would say, would express it, right? Even the bullies, right? So it became this thing that I would watch, but then I'd be like, man, this is crazy. The car fucking killing people. This is wild, right? So I found it interesting. And then like, I don't think I watched the film for a very long time once I got out of college. And then when I started doing like certain studies on like the Americana and how American people look at the narrative of themselves, and I wanted to start looking at horror and the horror kind of narrative of self, I started looking at this movie, and I found some very intriguing things in it, just around the psychology, like how American people choose their nihilism of like society, right? Like this kind of 80s, where you have a kind of celebration in certain 80s movies of the kind of American thing, or you'll have the like, it's tough, but we'll get through it. You then also have these like deeply nihilistic films about everything that is associated with the Americana is like death, right? It's like, I mean, it goes to like the last line of the movie, right? Like everything that's associated with like American culture is about destroying either it's like women or men or the young, I would say, in this movie. So it became an intriguing thing, in particularly thinking about Carpenter and how how I think he has a typical nihilistic view of America overall. He's not a very, I don't find him to be a very like hopeful person. Sometimes he'll have like a good revenge or something like The Fog, right? Where like that'll come back. We think we actually really should do The Fog. But like this is definitely, I think, probably one of his most nihilistic films. Like completely. He has no there is no positivity at all.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could get into with the car, but I think it also comes up as we talk about, things that happen within the film, and we can kind of talk about it through analysis.
Yeah.
So, anything that you want to throw out in terms of the people involved in the creation and all that kind of stuff?
So we'll mention King, right? We mentioned King. I don't know if you want to add anything. This is like the producer, one of the producers of the film. What's his name? Let me just get it in front of me. Richard Corbett. He produced the Salem's Lot miniseries, right? So he was interested in like doing more King stuff, and I think this is like around the time when basically optioning King's novels and short stories and everything into movies was like to start hitting. And he said he had seen other like things like Cujo, and I think he had seen the manuscript of Christine before it actually became like a published novel. So he did. So he purchased the rights to it, right? He actually had the rights to it. So it was already like purchased, I think, before even the book hit the stores. So they had it, and King was getting very popular. This adaptation, I think this is a big thing to think about. It's not like intellectual property was a new thing, but I do think you definitely see in the 80s another ramping up of trying to basically transfer things that are like in the novel sphere, other kind of, or stories and newspaper articles into movies, as it's starting to really, 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 churn out. Now Corbett's wanted Carpenter, but he actually wanted Carpenter for another King film first, and that was Firestarter, right? Which Carpenter said he wanted to do, but because The Thing, and it's funny, I don't know, probably people who are fans of The Thing, which is to me my favorite Carpenter film, and is many people's favorite film of his, was a massive financial failure. It didn't do well, so he got kicked off of Firestarter, right? And he wasn't able to do it. So coming back around when Christine happened, and Carpenter's kind of having like an interesting thing in his career, and he kind of talked about this. We talked about this a little bit with Prince of Darkness. Because Halloween was so successful, he refused to do any of the sequels for Halloween. The Thing, which he got a lot of money for, didn't do well. He was in this weird moment. The Fog did. I don't think The Fog did. Okay. Also, but he was in this position where he basically had to accept it, Christine, to basically kind of keep his career continued, right? Because he doesn't really speak about the film. He doesn't speak about the film negatively. He just doesn't seem to like really want to like step into a deep emotional kind of like, Christine. He says often like everything else was like personal projects. He was saying at that point that this wasn't a personal project. This wasn't something that he felt like connected to. The one thing I'll say about Carpenter though also is he's like for all that he says about that stuff, he definitely is a person though who like, I want my shit my way to a certain degree. So like, thinking that this doesn't have his imprint in terms of like ideology, I think would also be a wrong move, because a lot of this stuff isn't King. Some of the stuff is definitely him, and he's taking what he can from King. I said it also. He said his biggest issue with the film is he felt that it wasn't actually inherently scary. So I think he actually probably backed off from trying to make it scary. And he said, well, let me find out what's interesting about this world and like try to kind of shape it. Right. Columbia Pictures had wanted to like have him cast all these big people. Like they wanted Brooke Shields to play Lee. I think they were trying to get Scott Baio to play Arnie, which I find fucking hilarious. Scott Baio, that's a name we haven't brought up in here yet. That dude, right? They wanted, I think they tried to get, I think they did offer it to Kevin Bacon to play Dennis. He turned it down to do Footloose, right? But then he eventually got this guy Keith Gordon to play Arnie. I forgot the other guy's name who plays Dennis. What's his name?
It's
John Stockwell.
Yeah, Stockwell. Yeah.
The funny thing about the two of them that's hilarious is they both didn't stay in the acting business for very long. They both became directors.
Mm-hmm.
They're both like mostly directors in their career, right? Gordon was like a theater actor in New York. I actually think he's quite good in the movie. I actually think he's like he plays Artie in a really like convincing kind of way, and this like really like out over the top, out there kind of way. And then the Alexandra Paul who plays Lee, it was like I think it was her first really big role. She had done like a small part in the movie before that, and they brought her in. I mean, it's funny, like they wanted to play Brooke Shields, and then and then you see her, she has kind of a Brooke Shields kind of esque thing going for her a little bit there, and you get to they definitely were trying to go for like the Brooke Shields kind of thing. I mean, this is a comment for people who probably don't know that in the 80s, Brooke Shields was like one of the like big, absolute like I can't really like because I was super young, so I can't really chart that. Maybe people in the chat remember, but like in a top 5 list. Maybe she was one. She was in like the top 5 lists that people were really like, "Oh my God, she's the most beautiful young woman in the world," and all that. But I missed all of that, really for multiple reasons, age, and then being black. We didn't really follow that shit either where I was from. Yeah. So one of the big like things in the film that I think are interesting is that, and they say this in King's novel, right? The big thing, and I think we could talk about this from the beginning of the film, is that it's clear that the owner of the car, which we'll talk about it, it's about his kind of evil that's within him, and the car has that embodied within the car, right? After he dies. Though I'd be curious what I wasn't clear was the car, and you can correct me. So was the car inherently good before the owner gets it? Is that what the book says?
The book
kind of.
Yeah. I'll answer this. I want to say a couple other things on the cast, folks, but in the book, it's the owner who dies in the car. I might have those slightly wrong, but the previous owner dies in the car as they do in the movie, but the car becomes possessed by the owner, and that is where actually within the book, the possession then takes over Arnie, right?
Yeah.
And so like none of this. So this is one of the big changes between the book and the film, is that, and it's smart by Carpenter and probably the writer too, for multiple reasons, but one of which is it cuts about 300 pages of the 500 plus page book out, because it doesn't have to deal with like all of this weird shit around possession and like there's a lot in the book about the backstory of like the previous owner and how he comes to be evil and like all that kind of stuff. And so that all kind of is taken out of the movie.
So, but I think this also fits into Carpenter's general focus, because he's into this idea of like force of nature, right? Because in the film, the car is evil from its creation. So it embodies like actual evil properties, and the owners get basically consumed by the car's evil. Anyone who steps in it and it doesn't disrespect it in its first kind of few moments with it, right, becomes sucked in once they're kind of taking a liking to it, which is a very Carpenter thing. Because if you think about Halloween, and the idea of Mike Myers and his force of nature kind of things, even The Thing. so forth and so on. What's interesting with Carpenter to kind of think about is you see him like progressively get a bit more wider. I don't think he ever really got wide enough to really think about the totality. He's not a materialist. He's still a bit too mystical for me at times. But you can begin to see him begin to think about, like, if you go from like this to In the Mouth of Madness later, where he begins to think about like an actual person like is actually creating this like shitty world, and is part of a totality that exists, right? You could see like the innards of him trying to widen out, where the critique becomes the actual materials fuck up people, right? Yeah, there is more stuff on some of the cast stuff. There's a lot of great bit actors in here, like Robert Protsky we can get to, who I love. I love Robert Protsky, big fan. Harry Dean Stanton, others, but you want to say something else, Jay? Go ahead.
Well, just another one. Yeah, Art Evans is very brief in it and then gets killed. He's like the first person who's killed by Christine, a black man, which of course is like sort of the Scream scary, trope of black man as a die first. There's like no black people in this movie, but they have to make sure to kill a black man in the beginning.
The brother with a cigar.
But other things with the cast, I mean, I just find some of these things a little bit interesting to trace. John Stockwell, who plays Dennis. One thing to note too is in the book, he is the narrator and the main character, right? And so that's also somewhat important, and also a shift a little bit. He is very much kind of like the moral center of the movie, but he's not the main character. Like, I wouldn't say. I don't think the movie really revolves around him totally. You could argue, but I think both he and Arnie are like kind of both as much. Arnie probably has as much, if not more, screen time than Dennis in the film.
It's a classic two-hander in a real way. We can talk about that. It actually is a two-hander, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that he is well known for, he's in a movie like Losing It, but Top Gun. He plays Cougar in Top Gun, so he's one of the primary like kind of sidekicks in Top Gun. So not Goose, but kind of like, he's in there. And then the other thing about Lee, the actress Alexandra Paul who plays Lee, she is a pretty big deal. She's not at the time as big of a deal, obviously, as Brooke Shields would have been, but she does go on to do like 5 seasons of Baywatch in the 90s. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
She's the older lady in Baywatch. That's right. I totally forgot that, because I was looking at her face and I was like, wait, what is she again? But I didn't watch Baywatch, right. So
yeah. I did a little bit. I there was a house that I spent a lot of time on where Baywatch was like a staple in it. Not in my own house, but
Baywatch, yeah. I didn't get it. Like that's some shit that I just did not understand. Like I was just like I was like, what the fuck is this shit? What are they doing in Middle America?
All right. So yeah, those were the only other things. Like you said, there's a number, like there's Harry Dean Stanton, who plays Junkins, who's like a big character actor. There's the dude, you probably mentioned him already, who plays the can't even find his role on here, but he plays the guy Darnell, Robert Prosky.
Yeah, it's early. Robert Prosky's an interesting guy. I mean, we'll talk about it. I mean, Thief, which we have to do, and I've done a version of it already on Within Our Gates, but I want to do it again. Thief was his first film. This is like his 4th movie, which is crazy considering how old Robert Prosky was by the time he became an actor. But like really, he was a phenomenal character actor. And if you watch like his role in Thief to like this to also, isn't he in like Mrs. Doubtfire or some shit? Like, like if you like, let's put those 3 movies next to each other in his performances, and they're just so different, right? But he plays a particular, we'll get to Darnell. He plays a particular trope in this movie that I find also interesting. The junkyard worker, man,
Yeah, so it's interesting in that way, because I do think it's kind of a funny 80s movie where all 3 of the top like you said, like their careers as actors don't really like Lee Alexander Paul has the best career of any of them as an actor, at least, but still a lot of her stuff is like TV, like kind of like the Hallmark movie type stuff, and and things like that. And then of course 5 seasons of Baywatch. But anyway, you're muted.
I know, so wild, so wild. Oh my gosh, I'm now getting visions of it was like all like the slow motion running in bikinis and shorts that
And then
Baywatch used to
Hasselhoff.
I'm getting Hassel in the shorts, right? Oh my gosh, fucking Baywatch, man. That was the night. It was the 90s, right? Was it the 90s?
So it starts in 89. So there's actually like a connection, but she's not in it until like the mid 90s. So
Got
she's
it.
not one of the original cast members. Yeah.
God, so hilarious. So yeah, so we can jump into the movie. I mean, actually, I'm sorry, this would be disrespectful. Another thing to talk about though is some of the people who helped work on the movie stylistically. So it's been particularly like making the car, which is a Plymouth Fury 1957, right? Which is a really, and the guy is a Roy
58.
58, right? 58.
Yeah, 57
Yeah.
it comes out, but it's a 58.
Right.
Yeah.
So the effects supervisor Roy Arbogast, right? Who worked on The Thing as well. And it's funny because like Carpenter really wasn't as interested, he said at first, in like doing a lot of the animating of the car. He was just gonna have the car doing stuff. But when he brought on Arbogast was like, no, let's do some shit. Like let's like really like have the car like regenerate. So that's a really heavily Arbogast's intervention into the movie. And they worked pretty closely together. Carpenter was really into working with and taking the really, really good advice from his designers. Right. And Arbogast, being someone who was really, really, really highly creative in that way, they really push for it. So some of those famous scenes really were really also driven by Arbogast, and Carpenter being the good filmmaker that he is in this kind of way was like, yeah, let's do it, man. If you can give me the good argument, right? And a lot of that, and we'll talk about how it was done when it was. And then also the score, which is another Carpenter co-score with Alan Howarth, right, which they do together. And I haven't seen live Carpenter doing like his replays. I did see a video of them playing the Christine music on YouTube the other day. But also like, and of course like, and we can start the movie this way, like just pumped with tons of movies from the 50s, music from the 50s. So yeah, so the film, it starts off like automobile factory in Detroit, right? You get to see this thing, and it goes into like, is Bad to the Bone, right? The music
Starts right out with Bad to the Bone.
Bad to the Bone.
Also like this very heavy muscle car sound, right? Even before that comes in. Yeah.
The kind of the opening, and it's like John Carpenter's which I find interesting that it's not Stephen King's Christine, which probably pissed off Stephen King.
Well, and it is very interesting, right? Because I do think this is a point worth belaboring a little bit. I mean, they were both very big, but in movies at this time in 83, Carpenter would have been a bigger figure because of Hollywood. Halloween, not Hollywood, because of Halloween, than King was yet to the genre, because this is still fairly early on in King's work being translated, and a lot of his stuff in this early phase also gets done through television first before he starts to get more like big, like this is before It, like the first It and all of that stuff. And so I think it's important to say that, because I think that's true. Like a lot of times with King's work, although The Shining had come out in 80, but Kubrick gets a lot of the credit, I think, for that, even though it is King's like sort of source material. So it's an interesting moment in which, like I think Carpenter still is larger and has a little bit of a bigger draw, but they're both really rising figures in this period. Like they both, King's books are selling, massively at this time, and It's interesting in the respect that this was kind of a down period for Carpenter, but still, I think that name from Halloween, like, there's probably a lot of push by studios to kind of like recapture that, like, Halloween was such a hit, kind
Yeah.
of thing with Carpenter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and like, we're one studio where the business is fickle to one person for a minute. Like he wasn't able to manufacture something because of the thing, and he ended up losing Firestarter. Another producer sees it as an opportunity because it seemed like the producer was really in love with Carpenter, so like he didn't really care. So he felt like, yeah, I'm gonna put his name on it and really promote it out there as like a Carpenter thing, and like people really will be into it because making directors, I think for them was more important. And I think the idea of a big novelist probably was still a little like, I don't know. Can we really put a novelist on top of something yet? Which later then, does become a thing. So yeah, you get this kind of shot. You got like the factory, right? The big automobile factory, right? You see like the cars, like they're white, right? They're not yet painted. Some of them, right? You get the whole automobile factory. You're getting bad to the bone, right? The kind of like the blaring like lights of like putting things together, and it is interesting to start a film this way because then like very very quickly, right? You see a person like working on the hood of this 158 Plymouth, right? And like you get the shot where you see like the hood up, right? And he's working on it, and that fucking thing just goes and just gets his fingers like, right?
Christine's also the only red one
Red
in
one,
like an assembly line of white Plymouth Furies, which I found very interesting. Just
which I
because of the
find very
choice.
interesting as well. Yeah, and it's like they immediately situated that it's like it's different, right? But it still does come out of this assembly line, right? So like it's different. It doesn't come out of it, but it does come out of this assembly line, and they definitely look to like embody it a little bit very early. Like you get this sense that like its drop isn't an accident. Like you don't see the car shake, like it just literally closes, right? So you get this kind of like thought in your head. You're like, oh, what the hell just happened here? Did it possibly happen because it wanted it to? So then you see like the dude being taken off, and they got the stuff in there, right? And then you see the brother, right? What's the actor's name again? I always forget his name.
Art Evans, and he rest
Art
in peace. He
Evans.
passed away a couple
Yeah,
years ago, but like a
yeah.
long time character actor,
So
black character
many
actor.
movies, so many more Art Evans. Yeah. So Art Evans is in there. He has like the big old cigar, right? He comes in there. He's like looking at the car, right? He goes into the car, like sits there, and and it's funny because the first thing you see he does with the cigar is that he drops his cigar ash onto the seat, right? And you get this sense by the shot that like, well, this ain't gonna be good. Right? Something gonna happen here, right? You're like, okay, and he's sitting there like, feeling good in the car and all that, right? And a song comes on, right? Which song comes on? I
Yeah.
can't remember.
I'm trying to remember as well as see if
Yeah.
I don't think I wrote it down in my notes, but
Yeah,
yeah, it
I
does.
forgot to write this one down.
Yeah, it does play. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
song that comes on.
So the idea that it plays a song, so like it has like a kind of sense, right? So then after the song, Baby You Move Too Fast, right? Is that the song? I can't
It
remember it
might
right
be. I
now.
don't know. Some
Yeah.
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 I don't
So
know.
the song comes on, right? And and then you get the shot, the guy comes in, and eventually he basically finds him, right? And the guy falls out the car, right? And he's dead, right? With like I think like white in his mouth, right? You don't know exactly how he dies, but you know that like he's basically the car has like basically killed him, right? Um and yeah, it's interesting. Like when I watch the film, whenever I see this, I'm fascinated it to start like this because one of the things that they and I wonder like what the response was when he made the script or when the screenwriter made the script or when they made this edit, because this idea of something having inherent things like this and not having some kind of like backstory about it that somebody like implanted demon pixie dust on it. There was really a man who was putting spells on cars coming out. It's the shit that like the Sid Fields of the world will always try to make you do in screenplays, and this movie doesn't do that, right? Which is probably one of the things that I think I've always found somewhat attractive about the movie, right? In that even in like it breaks that little like obsessive good screenplay rule, right? Because even when you get to the backstory in the middle of the movie, the backstory is really about the car fucking up everybody else. It's not about what made the car fucked up. So that it leads you like to maybe making your own conclusions. And some people will not make any conclusions. They'll just think it's inherently evil, or some people will think other things, right? But I think it's just an interesting thing when I'm watching the movie. I'm like, huh, that's interesting, right? This factory produced this car that's fucked up, you know? So I'm like, so my brain is just kind of going in particular ways that are privy to my own politics or my own way of thinking about the world. Well, I'm like, yeah, you know, that's what capitalist motor production makes. But I'm not saying this is especially what Carpenter is writing, but it's where my brain is going.
Yeah, and I think we'll go as we talk through some of the different reads of the film. I mean, I do think that he is more explicitly. I do think both King and Carpenter are trying to make certain types of political commentary about American, life and existence through their work. But I do think, as you were talking through that, there's a part of me that doesn't like that move to take out a backstory, because it kind of then becomes this question, like, then you start to dabble into essentialism around things, right? Of like, there's something essentially evil about this. It just, things are just born bad, right? And this kind of, it's a nature versus nurture kind of discussion, and there's something naturally evil here. But I think you're right in terms of, if you want to make a commentary that's a little bit about, you know, the nature of American capitalism or American life and existence. I mean, it's still not a dialectical discussion. Anytime you start to talk about something just like naturally being evil, right? But there is a way that you can use that, I think, for interesting, critical purposes. And I definitely think Carpenter does that in the film.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he's never really, I've always wanted to interview him because he did once mention that while he's very proud of Halloween, he does say there was an essential problem to Mike Myers being an inherently evil creation. He does say that there's an issue to that, and I think that's what in some of his later films he tried to like go beyond that a little bit. Like if you think about Prince of Darkness, trying to like explain like there's like a thing of like an alien and so forth and so on, or in The Mouth of Madness when you're in this world that's really fucked up and you can't understand it, right? There's actually a reason, because it's this person, we're like stuck in this person's world, right? And that's why we can't get out of it. So I wonder if through these movies, and maybe it's why he also doesn't like it that much, maybe he began to recognize the limitations of creating this thing that doesn't really have an explanation. Because like I said, I can make that, well, yeah, capitalism, it just creates fucked up shit that's going to eat the youth. But other people are going to like be able to project whatever they want. And that's the chaos in movies like this, like that it doesn't really have what you said, like a good real anchor to like anchor yourself. So you can kind of take a shit any way that you want.
Yeah. It supports the kind of arguments that people will make, that there is just inherent evil in the world. Like that there are just like things that are you're just going to have kids who are born evil, basically, or you're just going to like bad, what do they call it? Like bad seeds, like this kind of
Mike Myers.
Yeah, exactly. But like I know it's a car, but it's still like that kind of thing of just like it's just evil. It's as someone said in the chat, they play bad to the bone right at the beginning, like bad to the, like it, like literally from its like genetic material as a car, right? It is evil. And I think that unfortunately we have too much of that within like American politics and American thinking around stuff, rather than understanding that, it is like these different processes that shape into there is evil in the world. Don't get me wrong. There absolutely is. But like it is shaped through different historical processes. It's not just
Yeah.
evil, like just because.
Yeah. So you get after that it has like a whatever that last song that plays, they make like a newer version, and you go to 1978, right? And you see Dennis come in his car. It's like a blue car, which I think is definitely clearly trying to make like the kind of juxtaposition. It's interesting because like Dennis, you learn very quickly, is a jock. But what's interesting about it is, the jock, though I will say in the 80s, this happens a couple of times. The good jock trope, right? You see it with, ironically, with Charlie Sheen and like Lucas, right? People remember that movie with Corey Haim. Like he's the decent jock, right? So we're like, groups of jocks are like really terrible. They try to make like the one good jock that exists, and Dennis is definitely situated in that way. So he comes to go pick up Arnie. He's the friend with the car. He's the friend with the access, right? And he goes to pick up Arnie, who has all the cliches. The glasses, awkward. He's fighting with his parents, right? I think he drop the garbage, like he's accident prone, right? Like he just can't get it together, right? Like Stephen said, not all jocks. Exactly. Exactly.
There's
you
something
know.
to say. There is something to say about that point, though, because I do think this is a very intentional choice from Carpenter. Like, I
Yeah.
think he's actually fucking with the 80s kind of paradigms here of the jock is the necessarily bad, bully, whatever, and the nerdy kid is the good, like that. So it's like it totally flips because Arnie's the one that becomes like the real monster within it, and
Unforgivable monster too. You don't.
yeah.
I mean, we'll get to it. There really is no requiem for Artie other than through Christine, which is hilarious, right? And it's really interesting, especially when I'm jumping ahead. If you juxtapose this movie with the Karate Kid, which I think is really, really interesting in that kind of like, way. So he picks up Arnie in the car, right? They're in the car, and like one of the things in this rewatch is just like how like the first, I think like 15 minutes of the movie, they really want to like get you into like young male, disrespectful, misogynistic horniness, right? Like it is so bombastically like in there, right? So the first thing that he wants to talk to Arnie about is like, is the idea that Arnie's a virgin, right? And I think he says like the line is like, what can we say about getting you laid at this moment, right? And he's giving him these options, and then they position the options. The first one as like, one cliche, the girl's too ugly because she has like hair on her mouth or something like that. And then the other one is someone is like a loose woman, right? So you get those two really clear, very often used cliches that exist not just in movies, but I think even in general male conversation, right, around young women in school, right? And Arnie has a resistance to it because of like, I would say it's like positioned in like two ways. One, like they're like demeaning because of their social position, which I really want to talk about that too. Like the idea, like the 80s over reliance on social, not just the 80s, but the 80s over reliance on social position instead of any kind of like class dynamics, right? So like social cachet becomes the way that we discuss interpersonal dynamics, right? With everything. And it is just interpersonal. There is no discussion about actual class analysis and how things are situated and created, right? So it becomes these all social antagonisms. When we get to people like Buddy, I think that's when like it gets really interesting. But then he also rejects it, which we find out later because of his own self-esteem too. Like, I think what does he say? I mean, it's really nasty. He makes a comment that he can't like, I hate to even say the line about like the sperm bank and he can't cash in, because meaning that he doesn't have the social points to cash in to get this thing to happen. So it's really clear. I'm not saying it's successful. I don't think it's fully successful. I do think Carpenter is doing it in a way as a kind of like nihilistic social commentary about where the state of young male conversation is. I don't think he interrogates it to the point that we can really do something with it. But I don't think he's doing it in a way of like, yeah, I think he's doing it in a way of look how fucked up it's all become. You see the level of these guys. It's disgusting. He definitely wants us to feel like it's disgusting. Whether it's productive, I think that's a legitimate conversation to have.
Yeah, and this scene comes straight out of the book too. Like it's not it may even be word for word from King's writing here. But it's definitely captures the mood, and actually this is one of the scenes that I still like thinking back on it all these years later. I remember reading this as a high school student, and it stuck with me. And there's a way, I mean, like, one of the things I think for me as a kid is like, yeah, we did use demeaning language to talk about each other, like emasculating, homophobic language, like all that kind of stuff, which is in this, sort of film. And to talk and objectify, you know, young women, right? Like when we were growing up in high school. Um, but there's a way in which it goes even beyond what would really be like, because it's like I can't even imagine sitting in a car and having a conversation like this with a friend of mine to like this level of objectification and like, you know, the terminology that they use and everything else. Like it feels a little bit too far, but I do think that that's intended. Like I do think that there's an intentionality around like, let's push this to the extreme. Like we know that these are the types of conversations and the attitudes that exist. Like let's really heighten them, right? And so that you have a kind of, it then becomes repulsive to watch in a way that, really, the more benign, whatever, not benign, but like the more toned down normal version of it is still repulsive, but like wouldn't be as off-putting to you as this is.
Yeah,
um
and that's where the film really does then sit archetypal, right? And then taking the archetypes and like meat grinding them in the ways that I think he wants to try to, right? And I can see that's how he's kind of like engaging with the material, right? So after that, they go to school, right? And when they're in the school, you get the hallway scene. Arnie is doing that, and one of the things you get immediately from Dennis, as the young woman played by Kelly Preston, rest in peace. That was John Travolta's wife, right? Who passed away some years ago, right? She was in it. She's like oogling over Dennis, right? And she's asking him about him playing football, and he's like, "Doctors have cleared me." So I think that's another interesting thing with Dennis that they do is they do give him a kind of like slightly belower status with jocks, because jocks are typically invincible, right? And he has a slightly less like invincibility. There's a kind of like a a defect in his armor, right? So where he has this jock status, he's slightly below because of some kind of injury that he has, which then gets pushed out later when he has his big accident, right? And then the other thing you get is the extension of like more of like the male misogyny, oogling, is when the friend comes in and they're talking about the new girl in school, right? There's the new girl, right? And she's supposed to be like the hottest thing ever, and they're talking about their thoughts of like sexual liaisons with her, right? And that, and you eventually do get to see her in this way. It's like the first time you see of Alexandra Paul, who plays Lee, walking down and then beginning to like oogle over her. So like the film is interesting in that like the beginning you get this car, right, and then they situate everything around this kind of like lust really, really, really like rough lust for something that they all kind of have at varying degrees of expression. And then, because in the scenes after this, you'll get is when they go get it. Oh, well, you get the conflict with the fight, and then you get to them to get in the car. I don't want to jump ahead, but it's like how they're trying to kind of bookend how you think about just like the lives of young people and like kind of like what in this area, like what obsesses them, right? And then also what could be the outlets for like a really deep degeneration, which ended up happening to Arnie.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a comment here about China, and
Yes,
I was trying to remember. I didn't write it down. Did you write it down?
No, I remember. I've always remembered this line, at least for the past like 5 to 6 years. They talk about that we've opened letting red China into the UN, right?
Right, the UN.
And they said, yeah, because like one of the things about Lee is that she's supposed to be really smart. So she's not just like a bombshell. She's also like deeply intelligent, right? Because he goes, I want to have deep, meaningful something, sex with her, right? And so he says like it's like the first smart thing that he can say. What about talking about Red China being led into the UN, right? And that's a thing, and it's an interesting little like boop that they put into there of like the political moment, something that they pluck out, which I find really interesting. I found intriguing. I don't really have a further thought beyond that, but it definitely always does stick out.
I mean, one thing to say is that the movie is set also not in the 80s. So it's an 80s movie, but it is set in 78, right? And so that is also a little bit interesting. I mean, it's actually the date that they frame as the very first date is like right in the middle of the Camp David Accords, which they don't talk about at all within the film. But like just it's interesting a little bit geopolitically. And I do think there's something about, I mean, it's only a 5-year difference. And that is, I think, probably the book setting is probably 78. So they probably just stuck with that. Although, interestingly, they moved the setting of the film from, it's in Pennsylvania. They're both fictitious towns, but the book is set in a fictitious town in Pennsylvania. They move it to California. Which is interesting. But yeah, anyway, those are just some of the kind of, I think, contextual points. One other thing to go back to for a minute is that even from the jump, Arnie's mother is portrayed a very particular way. And so right off the bat,
and the father too.
Yeah, we haven't seen him yet, but the mom we see first because Dennis pulls his car like just like an inch into her driveway, right? Like he's not even like on her driveway really. And he's just listening to the radio, not even that loud. And she's like screaming at him about noise pollution, which is like hilarious, right? And I was kind of like surprised because I was like, was that really a term that people used in 1983? But it's in the movie. So this is like got to be one of the earlier instances of that, which is such a fucking like white suburban, and white gentrifier term to talk about noise pollution. I remember when they fucking built like all these condos across from Martin Luther King projects in Harlem, right? And like all of the white gentrifiers that came in, like immediately wanted all of the like cultural basketball activities and stuff like that to stop at a certain time and sound to be cut off at a certain time, right? Because it was like noise pollution. It's like, you fucking moved here. Like you built condos, like, yeah. So anyways, it's such it just was funny in that respect, and very like, so she has a very overbearing, and you see that from the beginning, controlling, but also like kind of, I guess it's supposed to be, I think there's kind of a liberal WASP. I would say WASP, attitude that's coming here. And it's interesting as the movie goes on. You're muted, so.
I mean, you have to also like think about Mary Tyler Moore's character in Ordinary People. She's straight out of that, right? If people have seen that movie, it's the dad who's actually the more sensitive one, played by oh my god, why am I forgetting his name right now? Donald Sutherland, right? He's the more sensitive one. Mary Tyler Moore is like so, she's the one who can't deal with the fact that her son died and all that, and she ended up torturing the other son. So she's the one who's the more emotionally repressed. So every little thing pisses her off. So she even looks like her, the shorter hair. I mean, she becomes it like the trope of the tight ass mom of white mom of suburbia, right? So like they definitely are like taking that, and I would say Carpenter's like, yeah, he's like, yeah. Let's get her married, tell her more life. Let's get all these people, and this goes like what we talked about before with like things like even like Nightmare on Elm Street. The suburban concept that the parents suck, they're ineffectual, they can't do anything, they don't listen to their kids, they actually limit their kids, right? And they're not smart enough to see what could be happening to their children, which eventually then happens to Arnie. But Arnie's response to them, I think, is very interesting, because actually you don't see that a lot in movies up until you see it later, but until this point, I think he has like some responses that are definitely pretty new for movies. So one of the things that happened then is, so after they're in there, Dennis is like waiting for Arnie outside, and they tell him that basically this bully Buddy is basically fucking with him. So Dennis, as like his like jock friend protector, is like, well, let me go help out my homie, and he goes and he finds him. And then you get who really are the, like, I say that like the main antagonists of the film, right, are this bully crew led by this guy Buddy, right, and his like three like motley crew of people, right? I know you have a lot to say about this, Jared, of like the depiction of Buddy and that, but yeah, there's like a whole confrontation that ensues. There's a couple like really interesting moments. Maybe you could start it, and then I can add a couple of things. Yeah, it's true. That's actually. So what year? Wait a minute. What year? Because Grease is what year?
Grease has been out. Grease is like 70.
And then what year is the De Palma? You know what I'm talking about. What's her name? Carrie.
It's also I think 78.
Yeah, so I guess
76 is it? Yeah.
So the Travolta referencing, I think, definitely is it's definitely there in getting that guy up there.
Yeah, for sure, right? And it's like kind of again, I think that, I mean, that's a little bit interesting, right? Because in Grease, which I fucking hate Grease so much, but Grease is somewhat an attempt, I think, to like kind of flip a stereotype that exists at that time, right? Because the greaser, right, is usually demeaned within American kind of popular culture. It's like seen as the bad boy or whatever, right? I don't know. I'd have to rewatch Grease, which I will never do. So I'm not going to comment too much more on that. But anyway, like, yeah, so he's the villain. Buddy Ripperton is a villain and a bully. And again, I mean, like, I don't know. I think I said as much as I really want to say about the bullying thing. Well, I guess what I would say, because you and I are talking about the bullying thing a little bit more after Karate Kid, and my issue with it, because I think last time we got a little bit caught up, or I did, in this discussion of whether or not this depicts something that happens, right? Which of course it does. But it's less about that as the fact that I think the bully within Hollywood film, especially in the 80s, but in general, like plays a specific role, right? Which again is this kind of innate, inherent evil, like these just sort of like bad seeds. The bully is never given really much. Usually, every once in a while, they give them a story, right? Of like what's wrong, what's fucked up about their life that leads to them being that way, but not often. Like that's actually pretty rare with the bully.
Breakfast Club, Bender,
right? Yeah, every
right.
Once in a while. But it's more to portray this idea of this authoritarian personality. So it is connected, I think, into this like liberal view of like totalitarianism, authoritarianism, fascism, where you collapse any sort of like, it just dovetails with all of these images of undemocratic and like, this connection between like communism being essentially the same thing as fascism or equally bad because they're both repressive, right? They both um deny freedom and are they repress people without a kind of like unfairly, right? When they're just trying to express who they are and this kind of thing. And I think the bully plays that kind of ideological role usually, where you just see it and you're like appalled, right, by the actions of this thing, this person being so like unhinged, right, and so unfair to people. And so I think there is a lot of ideological work that putting bullies in movies in the way that they're portrayed in movies, you know, it does. That is different than when we interact with bullies in the real world. Because of course nobody likes a fucking bully, that's true. But usually in my experience with my encountering of bullies, the kids who bullied me or just other things I've seen, it is usually somebody who has been through some fucked up shit, like honestly, and it like has shaped them in a way that's like very unhealthy and where their response to that is like very violent and it's very hard to feel sympathetic or empathetic towards that person and all of that. But like, you at least like yeah, his dad has done this is that there's something that's there and like all of that becomes just not interesting within movies, right? Because it doesn't play the kind of ideological role to like humanize the person who's doing this kind of stuff.
So I just finished after like starting it and like not like finishing it, Workshops of Empire, about the Iowa Writers Workshop. I finished that book finally. Really good. Highly recommend people read it. And one of the things that the book really brings out that I think is really important, and for people who don't know it, it's the study of the Iowa Writers Workshop in the 1950s. One of the, one of the Cold War projects in basically taking the reins of culture, along with things like the Congress of Cultural Freedom and all the many things that many people have written about. I'd say it's like a good supplement to something like Francis Turner Saunders' book. He actually says that he was very, the Cultural Cold War inspired by that book, in that book. And then even Gabriel Rockhill's more recent book when he's going into theory. So one of the things that he talks about in the book, though, is one of the big things that the Iowa guys were like really, really, really obsessed with was the idea of the individual, right? And that the individual will always, it's almost like what's his name, we talked about it with Samantha, the guy who did the Star Wars, influenced the Star Wars stuff. I'm forgetting his name. Anyone that has it in the chat, or Jared, it's almost like his stuff, hero's journey, that they will have a kind of to basically become the great individual. You will go through a terrain of metaphysical, like predetermined social pain, right? That the world has these like things that are set up against you. And to get out of it, you have to basically combat it, right? And they saw totalitarianism as one of those things, right? So where they didn't want to always maybe make it communist, or where it wasn't appropriate, they would have figures that could work in that same kind of vein, because their thing was totalitarianism is the like real evil, right? And what is a totalitarian attitude? Domineering, authoritarian, fascist, right? These kinds of attitudes, controlling and wanting to destroy without actual reason, too. Like that it comes out of a kind of certain like human irrationality that's like pre-enlightenment stage, right? And I think when you put it with like Dennis, who has this good heart, right? And then you have Arnie, who is, has social things that can't let him be amongst others in the same kind of status level. And then also you add that he's a good mechanic, though there's maybe some questions, but he has a mechanic kind of sense, right, to himself, and he's smart, right? That these things are what's holding it back, but also that they're inherent. that they're inherent to the world, and we're gonna maybe forever be fighting them. So we have to become vigilant individuals, right? So I think I just wanted to add that to what Jay is saying, because this becomes the prominent way that writers approach things. So even someone like King, where he may not have went to Iowa, I actually don't know where he studied writing. I actually don't know any of that stuff about him, but it becomes part of the whole social fabric of how writers begin to like figure themselves out. And they talk about Henry James and what's his name, Moby Dick, Old Man in the Sea guy, Hemingway, how they kind of also popularize these kinds of thoughts. One other little quick joke that someone once said to me, and I want to throw this in there. It's just I have to say it, is like, someone says that there's like a Trotsky Stalin thing with this, that Stalin has like the jock and Trotsky's the nerd. Right? So a lot of times people, if you separate it, right? If you really don't like look at anything that either did, and then there's like these like nerds who love Trotsky, and the rough and tough jocks who like Stalin, right? And like that's, and it's so funny. But of course, if you actually look at exact history, they're like really terrible ways to look at either one of those figures. In any way that you may feel about them. But it's just kind of funny. I've heard that actually several times from people in various different things, right? Smarts versus brawn, right? Stalin was like a brawn guy and Trotsky was the smart one, which is like really funny. Anyway, digressions, a lot of them, but like getting back to like the fight, one of the interesting things about the fight is, so Buddy's like fucking with him, trying to do like the social embarrassment thing, and Dennis like intervenes to try to help him, and they do the thing with like his lunch, right? They always bullying the kid with like the food, right? And the two things that stand out to me is that Buddy looks like he's 30, which like it's so obvious that I know Carpenter was doing that shit on purpose. Like he got sideburns. I can't know that he's doing it on purpose, right? That's one. And the other thing is when one of the guys grabs Dennis, he grabs his nuts, and they really show it. Like they really show it, this kind of like castration, right? They have to like castrate you, right? To like bring you down, right? Those are two things that really, really stand out to me in that scene.
Yeah, and also that is also in the book. Like the grabbing and squeezing of the nuts and shit. Like because also remember the book is narrated through Dennis, right? So it's like he talks about this. And anyway, it's a weird scene, and I had the same reaction. I was like, this guy's got to be like 34 years old or something like that, but he's actually only 24. The actor who plays him in that, he just looks that way. Like, but anyway, I mean, 24 is old to be playing like a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, whatever he's supposed to be. I can't remember in the book, and I don't know if anybody in the chat is that familiar with the book. I feel like maybe he was like a super senior or something like that too. Like he was, because these are clearly kids that are struggling with high school, right? And like struggling to and they're a gang, right? In this kind of like, the same way that John Travolta and his boys were a gang in Greece or whatever, like, but yeah, I mean, it is a totally irrational scene. Like there's no context, like for, you're just dropped in, like all of a sudden, Buddy has stolen Arnie's lunch. I also did note that like Arnie Cunningham is not that different. Of course, Richie Cunningham, right, which is Happy Days, right? And so there is a little bit of like a kind of inversion of some of the Happy Days tropes, maybe, that you could talk about within this film, which would be kind of interesting. Because the other person that you could say that Buddy looks a little bit like maybe is the Fonz, right? Is another kind of archetypal character for him. But anyways, yeah, he grabs his paper bag lunch. He pulls out the switchblade. He cuts through the yogurt, and it all splats on the floor. Everything is very sexualized throughout a lot of this, and like there's a lot of visual and verbal stuff that's like very clear, like, okay, this is sexual frustration, or there's like sexual assault kind of, and then directs for sexual assault, obviously, as he grabs his nuts. Like this is all, very much both in the book and in the movie. And, it comes through again once we get Christine into the picture. Like it adds a whole other kind of element to all of that. But then the funniest part of this scene to me is the teacher coming back into the room and like fighting with Buddy, like shaking him and all of this and like yelling at him. Um, and then of course when finally Buddy pulls out the knife, which I still was never quite clear on like why he did it, even though he's sort of threatened to by the teacher,
Yeah.
and drops it on the floor. Then he knows he's getting expelled and he walks to the office or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
there's a blood feud. Like that's kind of the end of it, is that he says, "I'll fix you, Cunningham," and leaves.
Yeah, like there'll be an inevitable kind of clash, right? So then after that, they get in the car, like Arnie's glasses have been broken. They show that they're like stepped on. So you have like the tape over the glasses, right? And like, Arnie's basically saying, see, what a great first day, right? And you're really showing that Arnie's life is miserable and Dennis will be there to protect him, right? So you're kind of in this like nihilistic kind of thought of like, man, their fucking social situation is just like shit, right? So, but then they drive up, right, up a thing, and Arnie's like, no, look, go back, I want to see it. And then you begin to see the car, right? But it's fucked up now, right? It's like totally like dilapidated, and it's in this like backwoody area. It's so funny, like that's one of the thing about like the idea of California when I used to watch these movies, that like, there'd be all these suburban places, but then there's like this one outpost of like, low class, the lower class people who they haven't built over yet, which is another horror trope, right? That exists. Like there is this kind of newness that's been like erected on these lands, but underneath it still lies like the dregs of the old world. I always take it as like one of these bad enlightenment tropes, right? That I don't think that they realize, like, this kind of idea that we have an enlightened new society, but of course there's always going to be unenlightened people who are still there. So just kind of watch yourself a little bit, like, you're gonna meet some people who haven't really been, brought into the new society yet. So they go off into like a little bit of a back road, and right, they drive in and they see the car, right? And you get your homie Robert Blossoms comes out, with his, what is he wearing? I was actually asking, like, what's on his, he has a thing. It's like, is it a parachute? I don't know what it is on his body. It's like straps. And I'm like, is it like something for his back? I mean, it probably was like, make the motherfucker look weird. They were like, yeah, throw this on you. But I'm like, what actually is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. If anybody knows in the chat, I had the same question, although I sort of assumed that it was like a back brace of some kind or something like that. But it is very weird because there's like extra straps sort of like dangling off the top and everything. And shout out to Robert Blossoms, the Roberts Blossoms. He's been in a lot of stuff, and people probably most know him as Marley, the old man from Home Alone, who has the shovel and is like digging outside. But yeah, really good actor and really good in this movie. To the point that you raised, though, I mean, I do think that the depiction is true. Like when you go to small town America, wherever that is, it's actually the kind of the framework of like combined and uneven development, I think, is like helps people think through it, of like, you do have new development, you do have people who move out to these places and new houses that are built and so on, but then you do have these vestiges of like, folks who bought the land when it was like a lot cheaper and who don't have like, good jobs or whatever. And like, it just is, you will have these like basically kind of like, we had a lot of them where I grew up in Southern Oregon, but just you have like almost junkyards on people's property in certain ways, in certain parts of, neighborhoods or outlying areas, basically. And that's kind of like they're driving down this like So it might even be a dirt road they're driving right down, but they're driving around this road. Yeah, and they look over and he just sees Christine and yeah, she's in a total state of disrepair. Dennis's reactions are great to this, right? He's like, "Come on, man, like what are you doing? Like why are we like looking at this car?" They go up to it, you know, Arnie is so infatuated with it that a scoliosis corrector, maybe. That's interesting.
Mm.
Um, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. But anyway, um, let's see, do I
You talking about
have the
Arnie?
actual yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to pull up my notes here for this.
Yeah, I have a couple
Yeah,
of the
because
lines here too. Yeah.
yeah, so there's the whole stop the car, go back, and it's a whole thing too, right? Again, there's this whole in this period, which I think we do have to say for anyone who's listening who didn't grow up in the era, and even maybe for folks who didn't grow up in an area where car culture is like a big thing. And again, to reference Happy Days, there's the movie American Graffiti, which probably best like shows this. Um, so there's the whole idea of cruising, right? And there's this whole idea of you're riding in your car and you ride along and you see a beautiful girl or whatever. They're kind of looking for guys with nice cars to go ride with, this kind of thing. And this is depicted very much within American Graffiti, which is also George Lucas's first film, Harrison Ford too. Um, and but it's also I can't remember if it's the precursor to Happy Days? I think it is. I think it's the film comes out and then Happy Days spins out of American Graffiti, if I remember correctly. Folks can correct me in the chat if I don't have that quite right, but
I
I think
think
that's
so.
correct. Um, and so, but it's built around this like kind of muscle car and having a cool car, culture. So they sort of they're just riding home from school, but Arnie has this kind of cruising moment, like, "I just saw a beautiful girl. Like, you need to go back so that I can look at her and talk to her, try to holler at her," like, this kind of reaction, but it's that he's seen this, like, really beat up car, and Dennis is like, "What the fuck, man?" And it's interesting because, again, and this happens throughout the movie, but if you, like, just stop looking at the screen and listen to what they're talking about, right? It's very much a reaction where one person has a man has a response to what a girl looks like, and the other guy doesn't see it at all, and is like, "Oh, what are you talking about, man? Like I like her," you know, kind of thing. And Arnie is like instantly in love, and he's so then when LeBay comes out, they're talking about the car, and Arnie's like, "Whatever you want for her, it isn't enough," kind of thing, which is like the worst thing you could ever say when you're trying to negotiate, right? And Dennis is trying to help him out because LeBay's like, "Do you have a car?" And Dennis is like, "Yeah, he does. He has a Mustang." He's like, "No, I don't have a car." Like, but again, like it makes sense if you change it into a girl, right? Then Arnie would say, "No, I don't have a girl," because if he wants that girl, right, then he's not going to want them to think that he has another girl, basically. But anyways, they get in that whole back and forth around it, and he ends up paying 250, which is like insanely low for the car, even in the shape that it's in. But at the time, it would have been a lot of money, which is the point that they're making. They're like,
Yeah.
Dennis is like, this car's not worth $50, man. Like, what are you doing?
And that's what's like where it's interesting and like with like the commentary, because it becomes this idea that like the male, it's trying to, in my opinion, equal out like male lust that they would have for like a young woman to the same as like the lust for the automobile, which would, but you have to also think of the automobile as what all the things it represents, right? If Arnie does not have any social power, he has no mobility, right? He talks about it that Dennis has to drive him everywhere, right? This would give him mobility, status, pushing forward, right? But I think also the fact that it is broken, so he can kind of like relate to it, and it becomes a project that he could invest himself in and like make a new self. right? Like he can't do it in his own body. Because he says like his body, like I know my limit. He thinks something like I know my limitations, or I know what I am. He has himself as like what the vessel that he is preordained to be terrible. If he's just this, and later, and his instinct is correct, essentially, in the world of the movie. If he attaches himself to this car, he could actually go through a transformation, right? He's probably just think of it as the transformation of the car, but in the film, he actually does actually transform his actual human characteristics due to his really, you would say, he becomes totally intertwined with the car, right? They become like connected as one, right? And then you also get the way that LeBay speaks about the car when he says that it was his brother's car, right? And that his brother's dead, right? And a couple of things he says that I think are like really, really like telling, right? He says like her name's Christine. The first thing, the fact that she has a name, right? Like she's not just it's a Plymouth, it's a Fury 58. No, her name is Christine, so she becomes the embodiment, and it's also a what we identify as a female name. It's a woman, right? So the idea of possession, woman, something that you can hold and you could grab. So all the misogynistic ways of thinking about it are embodied into this vehicle. And then as you see it, it basically will then manifest itself back out that way as well. And then, and her name's Christine. Arnie says, I like that. Dennis goes, come on, Arnie, we got to get going, right? And then George LeBay, my asshole brother brought her back in September 57. That's when you got your new model year in September. Brand new she was. She had the smell of a brand new car. That's just about the finest smell in the world, except for maybe the P word, right? And I just think that's like right there, it's kind of laying it all out, right? This equating that. And I have to say, though, there is ways that I have seen people in actual real world, and I don't know if this comes from movies or popular culture. Of course, I'm not saying they become killer cars, but like there's a way that they think the idea of possession, how we possess goods and giving them gendered kind of characteristics. She, my girl. I've heard people say that about cars and things like that. My lady, right? That idea of possession, and you associate women with possession and what you can do with it, and then how it will change you. Or I've seen that. I remember when I was younger and I would talk to my friends about like getting a girl, like, yeah, man, she's going to like elevate you and all this type of stuff. If you get a girl of a certain higher status, right? And the conversation around the relationship as a status changer and like changing you, right? And really just how toxic and how fucking like nasty it is, because it all comes back to like the center point of male, right? Of male awakening, right? And how the male will awaken himself through some association with a woman or a car who's a woman. I mean, it's trying to make sense of it is actually like too chaotic because it actually doesn't make any sense, but it's something that people embody, right? And it's funny, whenever I watch the film and like this sequence, I always like, I feel dirty. Like, I feel like it's just like, right, you know, this movie has a lot of like you it's that drip of nasty, you know, that association, you know. It's so, yeah, I wanted to throw that in there because it's like it's really interesting. And like, yeah, and to add, one of the funniest parts though of it is like how he'd be like, yeah, it's $300, but I'll give it to you for $250. So then Arnie goes back, yeah, 300, right? And then it's like, he said it was 250. It's like, Arnie, why did you keep trying to pay more so you could basically tell people I paid 300 for it? It's like, dude, you got $50 off, you know, calm your ass down.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just supposed to convey that he's like so infatuated with it that he can't even fucking think straight, right? Like he can't approach this at all in any kind of rational way of like, oh, I should negotiate, I should try to get a better deal. Like he's actually doing the opposite. Um, yeah. Um, I agree with all of what you said. There was one point that you made. It'll probably come back to me at a later point when we're talking about one other thing is with suburban and small town and rural life, I do think that in a lot of ways it's unavoidable, the connection between a car and sex, because also for a lot of people it is the vehicle literally through which you will be able to have sex, right? Like, and also the location at which you will be able to have sex, right? Because it is actually a space that you have, that you are able to take away from the gaze of your parents or your partner's parents somewhere, right? And so anyway, I do think that that is a kind of unavoidable connection, especially in this era that we're talking about, and with that like kind of social group, right, of white people living in small towns, and with the kind of repression that we see from the parents, which I think we've already. Oh no, we don't see it yet. It's coming right now.
It's
Yeah,
literally
so that's
it's
coming.
literally the next
Yeah,
scene. So the
yeah.
next scene, he brings it back home. Arnie with Dennis. It's funny because in the shot, the way the shot is situated, Dennis is in the middle, right, and he's pouring a cup of milk, right, and Arnie's like he's to the on this side of
Why is
Dennis,
he drinking
right.
milk? Like, what the fuck?
It's like the jock thing, I think, like jock streak milk and all that type of shit, right? And so in a way, he's like it's showing that he's kind of caught in the middle, but also she's blaming Dennis, like also like Dennis, you didn't protect our son from getting this stupid ass car, and they're against it. Like they're very much against him having the car. Not just I don't know that it's a fucking bad car, though. The dad does peek at it, like what the fuck is this car is jacked up, right? But the fact that he did it without their permission, because the thing is he's able to buy it because he bought it cash. But he, what is it? The insurance. He can't get the insurance without parental permission, right? But um, he he basically is like, I need you to help me do this, and they refuse it, right? So so it gets into that kind of conversation about the parents are limiting him, right? You get the level of the confrontation of it. He's limited, he can't do it, the parents won't help him, so he has to leave, and you see him very defiant towards his parents, right? I've done everything you asked me to do, I get good grades, I didn't take this thing, I took the other thing you wanted me to do, right? So he basically goes off and he takes the car away, right? And Dennis is like, shit, my bad, I told him I didn't want him to do it. Like, why are you making a big point of that, But I can think it's going into the, adding to the point that the parents are another wall for Arnie, right? And they're not listening, and he's in this kind of situation that he can't elevate from.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately there's aspects of this, the parentage, like not it's obviously again heightened to a degree that's like very extreme, but that are actually familiar, for me, and familiar both within my own experience, but also the experience of some of my friends too, growing up, of just having a set of parents that like are very particular. And again, it's heightened in this film, but not beyond my reality, but certainly not beyond, I think, others, in
Hmm.
terms of like the kind of, we want you to be doing like XYZ, and this is, and having battles. I think it's a kind of a classic thing to some degree, of the battle between the teen and their parents around the amount of agency that they can have, right?
Hmm.
Um, it's actually interesting. I don't have enough data on this, but I do feel like this is changing somewhat for younger generations, where it's actually like parents are like trying to get our kids like, hey, you want to go outside? You want to you want to take some agency? Do you want to go explore the world a little bit more? Because I think that
Hmm.
technology and everything else has caused actually a lot of kind of regression of those impulses from kids, of like going into the tech and everything else, and connecting with people in social media and other spaces like that, but less in the real world.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like my own, limited data pop psychology sort of, thing. But I would say that that is a classic battle, and I think that um the car. their repression of his ability to have a car, right, is the repression of every kind of like social life, sexual life, you know, and again, this is it connects in, even though this is being portrayed in an American context, and I think they do understand that it's a kind of American waspy repression, which is discussed in a lot of horror movies, honestly. I mean, this is like a big trope and theme through which horror is played out, is this idea around teenage sexuality and freedom and parental kind of control and constraints on these things. But it is also, again, like kind of another version of totalitarianism in this case that Arnie is running into, of them literally saying, well, like, you can't even park the car here, right? And so then him having to then, as we see soon, go park it at Darnell's garage, right? Because his family won't even allow him to have his car, which I also get, because the car is a total piece of shit and just like
Right.
a bucket of crap. Like, you want that
Yeah.
thing in our driveway? Like, I don't want that shit here. But yeah.
I mean, even Darnell's will at like, what the fuck is this shit? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
before we get to Darnell, I mean, and I think we could talk about it more as we keep going. I think looking at this film and even some of the other horror films that we've done, like Nightmare on Elm Street, there, and we talk about it in different ways with Nightmare, but the kind of fundamental conservative nature of the horror genre, right? Because in the US, because it is obsessed with the of not thinking about the social production of people, right? Or reproduction, as you would say, right? And how they're kind of created. It's like situating the kind of individual in these kind of worlds of like horror or antagonisms that they have to break out of them. And in horror, they create these metaphysical kind of representations or manifestations of them, right? So whether it's Freddy Krueger or Christine or, Buddy, things like that, how they kind of situate themselves. But they're never and they lock them also in towns, in places, right? And they don't really have an interest of the kind of wider kind of world that produces these types of things. So if you don't have any kind of read of society, you watch it and you say, well, don't go to those kinds of towns, or I have to get away. If I get away from those towns, I'll be okay. Right. And it just shows you the kind of like limited conservative nature of how the kind of horror genre often really does play out, in society, or in movie making. So you definitely get him. So the next part is you get him. They go to Darnell's garage, and Darnell is he has a garage like owned by Robert Prosky. It's huge. Like, it's like this huge ass like junkyard. They roll up in there. Prosky really plays him kind of in this like over top, he's the guy. He has this way that he talks, right? And they love to do that with like workers, like they're around cars, not around a lot of people. They inhale gasoline and oil all day, so they've now become like, almost broken people. So it's like, I mean, it's so theatrical. I had read that Prosky was a theater actor before he became a film actor, and I was like, he must have been kick ass on stage, man. Seeing him do some of that stuff that he was doing, but he comes in and he's also like repulsed by the car. He's like, what the fuck is this shit, right? And he's like, if you're gonna park it here, you gotta make sure you get it together. Was it change the exhaust, right? Don't drive it out here with like changing the exhaust. Arnie's like, I got you, so forth and so on. So he's able to kind of park it at Darnell's. But yeah, and like there's a couple of like funny jokes about like no smoking, and the guys are smoking in the back, right? And like, they're antagonistic to kids. They don't like young people, these like workers. It's a trope that like you see a lot in movies, right? And I always wonder about like how that produces people for wanting to like interact with people who are in junkyards, where they have like an inherent fear, or like those people are fucking crazy, or they're just weird, right? But yeah, it's like a funny but strange little scene but Prosky plays it well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple funny little lines that I forgot to mention, but one is when they leave the house, Dennis is like, "Thanks for the milk," right? Like, But yeah, and I do. This is absolutely true. Where is it? There's a comment here. Yeah, milk had its moment in the 80s, and this is absolutely
Yep,
true. Yeah, in the 70s and 80s for
it does the
sure.
body good.
Um, yeah, we were hit with a lot of fucking advertising and dairy lobby, um, all that shit. But the other part too is I think there's a conversation in here, and I can't remember exactly the point on it, but Dennis is trying to understand
Yep.
what does Arnie see in the car, right? And he's like, I finally found something for the first time in my life that's uglier than me. Maybe that's what it is, he says.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You're not ugly, Arnie. Queer maybe, but not ugly," right? And so you get of course, there's a lot of that kind of joking, which is
You
not
need that
surprising at all
joke.
for the
You got to
yeah,
get that
yeah.
joke in there.
Um, especially though when he's telling him he's not ugly, right? Because that's the other
Right.
thing is that like it is actually, I think, probably a good or an accurate portrayal in those times that if like another man told a man that he was not ugly, that you had to make an anti-queer joke in that moment to say that like
Oh,
you
it's
haven't
like
crossed some kind of
it's like
line.
the version of like no H word, right? Right? Like exactly like it's like the version of that. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Right. And someone also
Um,
did mention in the chat, and I think it's important, you get the hint, the first hint, because Darnell says, I knew someone who had a car like that. He
mhm.
died in it. Right. And it kind of gets you jogging, and it'll be confirmed later that the person, did die in the car, you know. Um
Yep. And
so
then he said Darnell also says you can't polish a turd, right? That's one of the jokes that he
yeah,
makes about the car
right,
after they
right.
after they leave, because he's like basically like they're not gonna be able to get that thing together.
Yeah.
Um,
So the movie starts like picking up after here, like after like the setup, because the movie like it kind of like sets for like a half an hour, right? You kind of get like a big like a set, and it starts to like kind of move because it then like jumps in time where you basically they have their final conversation in the car, and it jumps like a month, right? And you see Arnie working on Christine, and like it's a bit more stable, but um it's not like clean, right? But the one thing you begin to see very quickly is that Arnie doesn't have his glasses anymore, right? And I remember the first time I saw this, I actually didn't notice it, right? I didn't notice it until a little bit later. I think one of the later scenes where he comes out and he doesn't have glasses. It was right before Dennis actually mentions it. But here he's like working on the car, they're what's his name, Darnell, and one of his like homies is like looking at him and saying the kid's pretty good, but they're like he's using all your parts. So he starts to make like a deal with Arnie, to basically be like, look, if you're gonna stay here, you're gonna have to like give me a little something. So it also sets up that Arnie's gonna end up like working with Darnell, or working for Darnell to basically kind of like move his stuff on. But he's getting the car together, right? And he's getting that stuff together. And then the other thing, they juxtapose it with it after. Though, do you have anything on this scene? You have something on this scene? Go ahead.
yeah, just quickly, I just found it funny because it's like Darnell basically like he's basically robbing. I mean, like he's been stealing parts from Darnell's place, which like it is a junkyard, but like anybody who knows like the junkyard slash auto shop, like that's what they do is they take parts from old cars, right? And then they put them in, as replacement parts, basically, right? And so Darnell's like doing him a solid, basically, and is like, "Look, man, like you can't just keep taking all my stuff." But he's like, "How about we do this? You work for me a little bit. You do some lubes, right? Oil changes, right? You do small jobs around the place. You put some toilet paper on the roll in the bathroom, and and in exchange for that, you could pick up junk from the piles, use whatever parts that you need, and um, maybe I'll even throw you a couple dollars." Which, like, it's funny watching this. You're like, this is a great deal for Arnie, right? He's gonna get free parts, which are like a lot of money. Anybody who knows cars and putting cars back together, like all like the to take Christine from this like totally dilapidated state to a really nice 1958 Plymouth Fury is going to be a lot of money unless you can get all of the parts that you need for free, which Darnell is basically offering him. And Arnie's response is basically like, "I'll have to think about it." And Darnell's like, "Well, don't think about it too long. I'll throw you out on your fucking ass." Like, but it's a very funny thing, but it's also, I think it's just to show, I don't know if it's yet, you kind of start to see, as you said, like he doesn't have the glasses anymore, and there's this transformation that happens. And again, this is handled differently in the book. In the book, it's dealt with that he's being possessed by LeBay, the brother LeBay, not the one that's played by the by Roberts. But anyway, he's changing, and so the question that I had watching it is like, is this just the old Arnie that is just like kind of antagonistic to stuff, but he starts to have this new confidence,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's more what it's coming into, of like, I'll have to think about it. Like, you're offering me this, but like, I don't have to take shit from you, man, kind of thing, kind of attitude that he has. But eventually he does end up working with Darnell. So
Well, I think the bookends, lead to the fact that he's starting to change, because then the next scene you get is study hall, which I always find funny, study hall scene, because I did not have study hall growing up. And I'm always like, what is this study hall shit? Like that people used to do in school. I never even heard of study hall. Like I never actually physically saw it, but they're in study hall. Dennis is in there with the friends, right? Kelly Preston's character is looking at Dennis, right? And like, giving him the eyes, but Dennis is fixed on Lee, right? And the friends are, and they're like kind of getting him to like, yeah, like ask her out, see if you can, right? And they have this whole sequence where he like, they definitely also want to position Dennis, not, he does have teenage boy tendencies, but he's a bit above it a little bit, right? He's not as nasty, right, as the others, right? So he does this thing where he's like nervous, he gets the book, and he definitely does go over to Lee to like talk to her real quick. And she kind of like gives him like a good eye, and he's like, hey, like, do you make a couple jokes, right, about history, and she agrees and so forth. And he's like, do you want to go out? And she's like, on a Friday, and she has a date, right? And he's like, or he says, why? Because I have a date. And he's like surprised. So he gets shot down, right? And there's also like, of course, the really old teacher there who's like, stop it, more of the idea of school being like the repressive totalitarian space that, that wants to limit like, social interaction. So you have that sequence, because then you book and then that with the next time you see Arnie, right? And he's looking a little bit more hip, right? He got a little bit of like, his vibe is a bit more, he doesn't have his glasses, and Dennis makes the comment, and he sees him at his house. Dennis basically comes to pick up Arnie to take him somewhere, right? They're supposed to like go out and hang out, right? And Arnie's like, I can't, I got work tonight. I got stuff to do, and now we've known he's working with Darnell, and I can't go. And his attitude is good. I gotta say, I really do like his performance, the way he plays it. He plays it really well. Like you see it, because he does it in a way that's definitely has like a heightened level to it, but he plays it very natural. Like it becomes part of his body. The way he has the hands in the pocket, it's like he has like really strong physical characteristics that begins to show the change, right? And he's arguing with his parents at like a higher qualitative level too, right? And the mom is like, did you break a date with your friend? You're gonna have no more friends when you're done with an Arnie, right? Like, and it's just like hitting that like higher level, and that's where it becomes like, it's like the battle of archetypes. You're just watching, you're like, this shit is like weird. What the fuck is happening here?
yeah, no, absolutely. And like right after that, you get after Arnie leaves, then Arnie's mother confides in Dennis. Like, and they're both kind of have this discussion. I forget the exact dialogue, but they're like, that he's changing, right? And that like the car is the thing that's causing him to kind of change. And the mom says, when we signed the registration papers at town hall, they told us the man who owned that car died in it of carbon monoxide poisoning, right? And Dennis says, does Arnie know about that? And she says, Arnie doesn't know about anything anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that. I don't think yet we get the point. I think it's later that Dennis sort of asks, like, how did you get your parents to agree to register the car? But
It
but
is
anyways,
later.
like, yeah, but anyways, I mean, that comes about. But essentially, when that does come about, Arnie's like, basically, I told them that I would drop out of school or whatever if they didn't do it,
Mhm.
basically. And so Arnie's also like, flipped the script on his parents and is finding different ways to exert pressure and take on a more powerful role, which gets embodied in other ways throughout as the movie goes on. But then we get the football game, right?
No, the next part is when he goes back to LeBay and he
Okay.
asks and he confronts him about the car, right? And and LeBay says like which I think is really like an interesting thing where he says, I mean, he says, like, I know about your brother, right, and so forth and so on. And then he said, like, Dennis basically says to him, like, well, if you would have told Arnie, this would have never happened, right? But LeBay was like, no, he says, like, either you're dumber than you look, or you don't know your friend very well. He had the same look in his eye that my brother always had. Probably the only thing my brother ever loved in his whole rotten life was that car. No shitter ever came between him and Christine, even if they did watch out. He had a 5-year-old daughter choked to death in her. He wouldn't get rid of her. He just rode around the radio blaring, not a care in the world except for Christine. Only time I interfered with it was when Rita killed herself. And Rita was the brother's wife. So you get this like whole narrative about, the brother, the levels of insanity he went. So that becomes implanted in everything you see for the rest of the film. Like, you just know it's kind of inevitable where it turns that Arnie's going to basically turn into something. He's already turning, right? He's already begin to turn, right? And this is where I think, while, like, I think we go back to the beginning of the film where we talked about, like, it's an interesting idea, right? Like, you can take like a metaphysical point as a metaphor of the properties of a commodity could, like, eventually overtake you and make you. And it could be, but because we don't get a kind of more materialist read of how these things are developed, it can go into any way that you want to essentially embody this thought, right? Whether it's things have inherently, bad things and it destroy people, or they bring out what's naturally bad in Arnie. You could read that into it. Or if you're someone like me and you just want to, like, think about it, well, that's what capitalist production does to people. It destroys people. But because it does not have a rooted in a particular opinion, you can't really situate it, right? Or you can situate it any way that you want, which is what they kind of do with American movies, right? So I think you have that. I think is the football game. Oh, does he go to the garage next? Yeah, he goes to the garage, right? It's a quick scene where he goes to the garage, right, and he tries to, like, look at the car, Dennis, right, and the music goes off. So you get a confirmation that the car's alive, and then you get the football game, right, where they're out, and it's funny how those things are shot, right, where you have, like, they're definitely using this kind of, like, softer, like, it's like softer glade, because it's like he's definitely wants to play with the idea of the suburbs, the 50s and the 70s, as because, like, the first thing you see in, like, the sweeping shot of, like, the football game are, like, these, like, blonde girls walking, right? It's like softer light, and it's like the Americana. And I just see John Carpenter in the car, like, fuck this shit. This shit sucks. Whack crap, right? Blah blah blah. And it's the disdain for American culture, right? Right. Through this, like, nihilistic, kind of looking at society, right? And you get, like, the football game and, like, Dennis, and, like, the way they shoot it, like, leveled. So you really get like the hits of, like, the football. Actually, I mean, it's a short football sequence, but I have to say it's one of the better football sequences I've seen shot. A lot of times football sequences suck in movies. Like, this was not bad, right? You see Kelly Press as the cheerleader, right? And Dennis is, he's playing. He's like, I guess he's like, it's like, I guess in, like, high school football, because you'll be a, what do they call it when you're not just a running back, because you would play that end receiver. They would have a name for it back in, like, old days, because it wouldn't be would it be halfback?
Halfback or tailback? I mean, like,
Tailback. I think it's
yeah.
tailback. Yeah.
I mean,
So he plays
so
like
he's not a wide
multiple
receiver, but
positions.
anyways, yeah, he's running a route. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah.
running a route. And when he's running the route, right, he sees and he's like distracted because he sees and they really glare it out. The car come up and the car is like fucking pristine, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like absolutely a dream. And he's like noticing something, he's distracted. And then he sees Arnie and Lee come out the car, right? And he's like even more distracted, right? And as he's running, when the football's thrown, he sees Arnie and Lee like kiss, and then wow, he gets hit, trying to catch the ball. And Dennis is done. Like he's fucked up. Like you can see him on like the ground. Kelly Preston's like, oh my God. I think it's the last time you see her in the movie.
Kelly Preston gets done really dirty in this film
Oh,
too,
she's
right?
terrible. She gets done so bad in this movie. She's the nicest cheerleader ever, actually. She likes the guy, man. She gets really like dissed.
I mean, I do think, yeah, I think your point about Carpenter's like, desire to kind of like fuck with all of these things is really apparent, the way that it is. I mean, it's like, some of these classic, whether it's like sort of, Friday Night Lights, obviously that comes much later or whatever, but like, this like, I mean, even in Red Dawn, you had this, right? Like the football team, right? I mean, and it's huge, right? Football is so fucking big to America, and so you get the football game. He's a good football player. You get the cheerleaders, you get the cars. Like it's all kind of there. It's like this perfect high school scene. But Arnie and Christine like really come in and fuck up its energy, right? And so then your star football player just gets his back fucking broken, basically. I mean, the man is in the hospital for like six. I remember I was rewatching because I hadn't watched it. I'm like, does he ever walk again? Like, it's kind of like that kind of level. He does eventually. Spoiler alert, but yeah. I mean, whatever. Like, it's
And
it's
the final shot is you see Christine
yeah,
before you cut to the thing. So like there's also that sense that like whether I'm not be like direct that Christine caused it,
oh
in
for
a
sure,
way. Like
yeah,
Christine like is the reason, and you get like the next level of like vindictiveness, which I think is an interesting thing because this is one of the things we haven't really talked about yet is like Christine is the embodiment of woman and vindictiveness, right? And the extension of what she does constantly is like vindictive payback, right? Right. You fuck with me and mine, I will destroy you. Right. So the kind of like witch element, that kind of idea, like, and like never being able to let go of a grudge, right? And like unless you like you get and I will crush you. So there's definitely that embodiment as well to it, right? um so
yeah.
yeah, you get Dennis in the hospital next, right? And he's like neck brace because like one of his legs are up and all that. And Arnie comes to see him, and Arnie, it's like Arnie's attitude is a bit like, it's different. Like he's not like concerned, but he's like, he brings him like 50 was a 500 dirty limericks book or something like that, right? For him to read. And Dennis is clearly fucked up. He's like, I can never play football again, so forth and so on. And like, Arnie doesn't really like emotionally engage him. So then it goes to Dennis being like, hey, what's up with you and like Lee? You got with her. And he's like, he's making all the jokes. Well, she loves me for my body type jokes. And, he's definitely, I mean, even in the shot, right? Like Dennis is now in the bed. It's a lower, you get a higher angle shot of, of, of Arnie. Arnie has power, and not even more power. Not bad. He has almost like he has all the power, right? Like he is the powerful one. Like they make the transfer like really quick in the film.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's again, it's like this is where this inversion is happening too within like typical tropes, right? Because the jock football player, really nice guy. I mean, and we can talk about like the way films do, with nice guys don't get the girl but like he's the one who's supposed to get the girls. Like he's the one who's supposed to be in the beginning, it's very clear that of the two of them, he's the more, attractive. He has Jennifer, no, what's the name
Kelly
of the
Preston.
cheerleader yeah, Kelly Preston, like, really wants to
Yeah.
get with him, and he's like, no, like, like, he's almost too good, but Lee seems like a natural pairing for him. And it's, we have that scene already that we talked about in the library where she's like, sorry, I've already got a date. And Arnie is like, you know, he's the nerd, he's scrawnier, he had the glasses, like, he just was so, he's like the incel energy, right? Is like supposed to be kind of what you're getting. It's like really a depiction of that, right? Um, and of course, this is all like Arnie's now got everything. And yeah, not Darnell, what's his name? Dennis. Dennis is laid up in the hospital, basically. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's all there at that point. And I think it says,
Well,
he says that Arnie says this to Dennis. He says, has it ever occurred to you that part of being a parent is trying to kill your kids? Right. Which is an interesting, kind of
which is
Freudian
like,
moment, I guess, in the film.
yeah, and I think this is really something that we just have to say. I mean, this is like literally the theme of the 80s. Outside of like a few movies, where even then, at best, they make the parents. I mean, sometimes you'll have like a good parent or like a dead. They'll do like a dead parent, maybe, right? And then like there's like a single parent who, because of work, can't do everything. I think isn't it kind of like Pretty in Pink, right? Isn't that the Pretty in Pink thing? Like the mom is dead and the dad's like overworked, so they kind of like give him, but basically the parents don't have the ability, and then at worst, the parents are really bad, like Arnie's parents, or like in Nightmare on Elm Street, the mom killed Freddy Krueger, and that's the reason why they're all getting killed in their sleep, right? All these different things of parents just being totally terrible in suburbia, right? And like I said, I think I said this in the Freddy thing, is that it's not that to say that these parents weren't good, were all good parents, and they're being misrepresented, but there is no real conversation of like the development of just how these societies have come about in America. So because there isn't, you could only make nihilism, right? You could only just make this thing as disgusting. Everything sucks, right? Fuck this shit, and people go, and then people will do what they will with that kind of information, right? So the next sequence is like a pretty big sequence in the movie where you get Arnie and Lee at the drive-in, right? And this is like a big like climax sequence where you really get to see Christine in action. So they're doing the teen makeout thing in the rain in the car, right? Arnie's trying to take it to the next level, and Lee leaves. And at first you think it's because like she doesn't want to do it because she's not ready. But her thing, when he goes, so then Arnie goes and like runs after her, and she's like, "It's the car." She's like, "Yo, this car, there's something about this car that I ain't fucking with." And you like the car more than you like me, right? She mentions that, right, to him. But also there's like a sense where she's like, "There's something about this car that's just off." Like she's just not feeling it, right? And he convinces her to basically get back in the car, right? And she's in the car and she's eating a burger, right? And Arnie has to go out because I think something happens with the windshield wiper, and he can't see which is Christine fucking up the windshield wiper, the car. So he has to go out and fix it. He locks the door, and then with Christine's special powers, she's able to get Lee to start choking, right? And you get the sequence with like the music coming up in the light, right? Carpenter, I gotta give it to him with that stuff. He's really this like, it's not scary, but there is there's like a tenseness to it. Like whenever I watch it, I'm always just like, yeah, that shit's weird. Like it comes and it's very tense. And it's like, and the scene is long. Like it's not like a quick sequence. Like she's really like choking, like like doing all of it. He can't get in the car, like you getting it right. And right, you're mine. The song choices are hilarious. Go ahead.
One thing to say about the music too that I think is an interesting thing, and like kind of it actually, I was trying to think of other movies. I'd be interested if people have examples of movies that did this before, because I don't know that it's the first movie to do this, but it's early on. Now we're kind of used to this idea of taking a song that is like cheerful, upbeat, whatever, and like slowing it down and making it actually sound like sinister and dark in a certain way, right? I mean, obviously, for those of us who follow hip hop and sampling. Like this has kind of been something that really in the 90s, like people like RZA or others are really great at like distorting the sample, right? And changing the way that the song then sounds as a result, right? Um, but that's what happens. Like they call it like kind of a warbly sound, but basically it's sort of like it's the songs are all a little off, but they play all of these classic like 1950s early rock and roll songs, And so that's yeah, it's this you're mine and we belong together thing, but it's slightly extended, it's slightly it's stretched and deepened, right? So it's like if you just change speed on something, it will adjust obviously both the length of it, but also like drop it an octave or whatever. And so that's kind of what happens. Um,
Yeah.
and I thought that was interesting within the film because I do think it's early on in that kind of effect being applied to music to make something that is supposed to be actually very upbeat and cheerful or loving feel like a little bit sinister and dark. And that's the way Christine plays songs.
Yeah. And then yeah, it's but it also adds a funny to it. So it gives like a distancing effect to the thing a little bit too. So you really actually end up feeling like you're watching because you're in the mind of Christine and you know that Christine is doing it. Well, like the others might not be like so totally aware of it. Right. Maybe Lee has a little bit of an aware, but she's finding out in the moment. We have the totality of the film that we've watched so far. So we're now watching it. So in a way, we actually even kind of like become Christine, but we have no control over it. So it's that kind of multiple things that movies do. It makes you feel empowered and disempowered at the same time. But what you're empowered to do is something immoral, like killing a person, right? Making them choke, right? But then, you get the guy come and break in, right? So they do this constant juxtaposition in like the background of the sequence where you see a guy in the other car and he's like watching their interaction. So eventually he's the one who comes in and saves Lee after she's able to kind of like get the lock open, and he opens the door and he does like the Heimlich, and then Arnie has this moment, get your hands off my woman kind of moment, right? And then he's able to help her, which is hilarious.
Yeah, and it becomes this moment a little bit later on when Lee's like, "You didn't even try to save me," and he's like, "Oh, I could have done the Heimlich," and she's like, "Yeah, but you didn't, right? Like,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
actually, you tried to fight the guy who saved my life." But
Yeah.
there was a line a little bit before this that I do think is important. Is Arnie says, "I thought girls were supposed to be jealous of other girls, not cars." This is when they're in the car right before the hamburger choking scene happens. And she says, "This car's a girl." And he then she like hits the dashboard or something like that, and he's like, "Don't do that." And he's like, "What? You don't like me slapping your girl?" Right? And like, so anyway, and he makes some comment about, "Geez, nobody seems to like my car nowadays," right? But yeah, anyway, there is a whole, I do think one of the elements you're supposed to get with Christine beyond the like sort of vengeful thing or whatever is jealousy, right? And I think it does explain a lot of things, like whether it's the jealousy that she would have had in like taking out people who were close to LeBay, her previous owner, like even her kids, right? It's like this that they're taking time away from her and attention and love away from her, right? And so she's very this like toxic jealousy, kind of idea.
And I think like if you did like the radical version of this, I think that could be an interesting thing to like do, right? The idea that commodities under our society, right, require that much attention, right? So if you're really gonna to like go into like deep commodity fetish, it would actually require you to hate everyone around you, right? And you can't get past, you can't break the bond with your commodity. If there was the radical materialist Christine, the Marxist Christine, that's what you would have to do, right? That's the thing, right? It you need the commodity so much, right?
And I think if we were to remake this film today, this would be Christine, right? You know,
Word.
the cell phone, I think, has become like, I think, you know, when you and when you think about the reshaping of like human behavior and stuff, and the way that how nasty Arnie gets, also when you see the way that people, and we're all addicted to these things, I think, to some level or another, but people who get deeply addicted and watching like kids on them and stuff like that, like it's like, whoa, like this thing has a fucking power and a hold that is actually hard to break.
So she gets back in the car, which I've always found odd that she would actually get back in the car to drive her home. But you know, they got to tie it up in some way. So he gets Lee back home, and they have this conversation where, you know, she's basically like, get rid of that fucking car. You know, it's trying to take me out. It's fucked up, right? And he's kind of protesting, saying like, you know, I want another shot. But he's also, you're seeing more of his aggressive. What's interesting about in is that what he's actually getting, in my opinion, at this moment, is actually more typical what we would call like toxically masculine male traits. It's not like he's even developing like a metaphysical thing. He's actually just becoming more of a hyper male. So Christine, this woman, Carr, is actually who's into possession, and like encouraging possession of her, right? The car is making him more of a hyper male, right? Now that he's in that kind of social engagement with the car, which he's not. Well, it's interesting because he is, the next scene you show, he shows he is aware of it to a certain degree when he can't turn the car on, and he has to go to Christine, I'm sorry, you know, I love you, all this. He didn't say that, but like it's the expression of it, right? But that's what is happening. Like he's trying to basically like to get Lee back. He's doing all the things that the jock actually would do in this moment. He's actually doing the jock thing, right? What we would normally see a character like Dennis do to try to get her back.
Yeah, or like Biff in like
Biff.
in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in the book actually, and I'm glad that they don't go into it in like depth in the movie, but there's like an extended um discussion of blue balls within within the book. You know, and so he's supposed to be deeply sexually frustrated, right? And like, you know, and so that's part of like what's
They
going on.
kind
But
of show
he
it
puts
a
that off
little
on
bit.
Lee. Yeah, he puts that off on Lee and saying, I think you're just sexually frustrated. He tries to actually pull her in, and like then that she like pushes him away, and that kind of
That
is how they
line,
leave
man.
each
That
other.
line,
Yeah.
I'm like, homie, how, yo, if she would have kicked you in your face, I'd have been, you know what I mean? She'd have been justified, bro. Like that line, I'm always like, but that's what it is. He's become this like this really disgusting male in this kind of way. So he, the next scene I think is really important. It's like a tag on. Like I said, he gets back in the car and Christine won't turn on, right? And she won't turn. And this kind of gets you the knowledge that he knows Christine is alive, right? We know that because like you're not quite sure if he knows them, but he knows that Christine has some kind of embodiment, right? Whether he knows like the full extent of it yet, we don't quite know because the movie like keeps things from us. But there's definitely an awareness that he has at this moment that Christine on some level has a kind of is essentially is a person or a living being of some sorts.
And Lee also has made it clear to him at this point that like she would be with him sexually even, but not while that car is around, basically, and tells him to like get rid of that car. And so I take this scene too as Christine like responding to that, like, and she like, you gotta choose kind of thing. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, you can't just turn my engine on that easily.
Right, which is an interesting thing, right? This idea of like, you know, actual human contact or like an obsession with a commodity, right? And like the fact that's a choice that Arnie can't seem to figure out is like shows you how fucked he is, right? So he drives off, right? And the other thing, that we didn't talk about is at the football game, Buddy and his crew recognize that that's Arnie's car, right? And they see that he's changed. Cunningham, as they call it, or was it something like Cunningham or something they call him or something? They fuck with his name. I can't remember, right? In some kind of way. So when when Arnie goes back to drive the car at Darnell's garage, Buddy and them sneak in, right? With like and they basically go up in there and they fuck up the car. They like, I mean, like once they fuck up, they like destroy it. And like they have that shot of like it's like this big wide of like Buddy on top of the car with a freaking sledgehammer. It's just like giving it the business. There is a moment where like Christine might engage in some self-defense via the radio, but the one of the dudes like smashes up the radio and they totally like level it. They like destroy it, like just you don't see the totality to like the next day when Arnie comes back with Lee, right? And they're in like the beginnings of maybe of like a makeup. He talks to her about like, possibly like going to school together. They're going to like apply to the same schools, right? You get this nice shot of them, two shot, they're kind of walking, and then you turn the lip and you see the car like totally destroyed. And then Arnie, like, he's like losing it, right? And he just, and then when Lee comes over to like kind of console him and ask what happened, he barks on her, like, get away from me, and all that type of stuff. Don't you touch her. Is like to get away from her, right? He gets into it. So you see what now he's going to protect. He's going to protect this car, this commodity that's now become also, his love, the love of his life.
There's a few important points to make here. I mean, one is that the music, the song and the score that is played during the destruction of Christine by this gang of guys is called The Rape. And it is, very much supposed to be coded as a sexual assault against Christine that is enacted by, by Buddy Ripperton and his gang of folks. Moochie is one of the other names of the guys. He's the guy I think who smashes the radio. Another guy who becomes a director after a very short acting career. And yeah, so that's important also, I think, in terms of the context of Christine's vengeance campaign also, is that she's actually getting back her rapists, right, within the context of the film, which is actually kind of cool in some respects. I mean, not cool that obviously that, but yes, cool that she's getting back, right? But it is also, then that scene when they come in, when Arnie and Lee come in and they're coming to the car, they're also they're talking as they're coming in that they're gonna like go to college together potentially. Like Arnie's like, we should apply to all the same schools, and she's like, oh really? And so there's a very much, it's kind of like Arnie has reconsidered a little bit and is actually thinking like maybe I can somehow figure out how to balance Christine and Lee, or I'm really interested in trying to get Lee to be my girlfriend long term. And then, yeah, once he sees Christine is all just totally destroyed. Like Christine was a junk pile basically when he got her, but that was more like deterioration from age and so on. In this case, like they've smashed up the engine, they've smashed up, like it's just a pile of parts basically at this. Yeah.
So I didn't know that about the song, so it actually even adds to the visual depiction, because if you think of that wide shot of Buddy, I mean, it's sexual if you think about it. It's like it's the visual depiction of what you would see in a sexual assault sequence, right? And he like brings the thing up, and majority of what they do to Christine are stabbing motions, right? And they're very very like deliberate to show like so like stabbing motions, we can all know what that is, right? So they're definitely trying to like show that. And like it's interesting because like if you think about the context of Buddy, and then before when they try to grab Dennis's, like, balls and all that type of stuff, this idea that their violence will also come through a kind of like sexual, not even kind of through a sexual violence as well. And that they will also, even if it's subconsciously, see Christine in that way too. So, like, not only do they have to, they could easily go just kick Cunningham's ass, right? They could easily go beat Arnie's butt up. No, they're going to like destroy his woman, right? Which is part of like, a thing that you see a lot in movies, right? When you use sexual assault, which has its problems, and many a time, but they're putting Carpenter and I don't know if I don't know if probably it's in the book. They're attempting to kind of put it in this same kind of way, in this story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember the degree. I think it's better framed that way within um the movie to my recollection, but I have
Yeah.
not read the book in a very long time.
Yeah.
But the one thing I would say is like um the in both the book and the movie, another aspect of it is that one of them takes a dump on the dashboard, right? Which they don't
Yes.
show
Yes. They
in the
talk about it
movie,
in they
but
talk about it
they
here.
talk about it, right? And so this is like another layer
Yeah.
of just like defiling and just,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the other things is when you see Arnie, he's in a red coat when he goes back and he sees it, and it's totally a James Dean thing. If he's totally trying to look like Rebel Without a Cause, right? Because this is when you see Arnie basically go on the offensive, right? So the first scene you see with Arnie, which is like wild, right, is with his dad, right? So he's sitting there with his dad, and like dad is like, I know this sucks, right? And you lost your car, and Arnie's like looking like super defiant, right? And he's like, this wouldn't have happened if you let me park it here. He's blaming them, right? The mom is like not having it, so forth and so on. She's like really like, distraught about it, but we'll get you another car. And he's like, no, you want to separate me from Christine, is like one of like the biggest things. So he leaves the table, and the dad is like, you're not going to talk to your mom like that. And like you see, which I think is like interesting, and I've always wondered, like I almost want to like count the movies where you see a son physically fight back his father in a movie, right? Because he basically like goes at his dad. He basically like, yeah, he like disarms and like basically fights his own father in the sequence. I'm like, and also overpowers his dad, right? And I'm trying to think of movies where you see that up until this point, right? He like gets him by the neck, right? Like strangles him, and he like, looks him in the eye. And it's what's the wildest one is that he pats him on the face when he walks up the stairs. I mean, like it's pretty sinister. It's pretty like high level. And they have him like a low angle, right? So it's pretty intense. And then you take that sequence, right, with the dad, and you get back to the car, and the car's jacked up. And now you have, which I think is actually one of the cooler. I actually quite love watching this scene where basically, Arnie goes to the garage, and he begins talking to Christine a bit, right? And you get the thought that he's gonna try the repair, right? But then he's like, show me, right? Show me what you got. And literally to the music, you see the car like totally like regenerate, and you go, right? You're just like, oh shit, right? It's like regenerating and it becomes whole again, which I always read that. Well, that's how he got the car like that in the first place, right? He was fixing it, but Christine was like slowly showing like her powers to him. We just never got a chance to see it.
Yeah, because I think we also maybe skipped over the first, maybe it comes later. The detective scene, maybe it comes later, the first detective scene, but
Later,
yeah, it does come later, that's right. But
after the death.
there is a line in that which I think raises questions about earlier fix up too, because he's like, do they even make this paint anymore? Like, where did you get this paint? You know? But yeah, I mean that scene is really cool. The one where she regenerates. I mean, it's to describe it to people, it's actually when you're watching it. there's a lot of questions of like, how did they do this? I don't know if you have any insights on that, but um it reminds me a lot of like the Transformers movies once you get to like the Michael Bay version of them. Like they she actually seems like she's transforming from this pile of junk. And it's also very sexualized, right? Again, so like the show me thing, he's like looking at her. It's very like kind of sexual voyeuristic. And there's a way this is it's gonna sound real weird for me to describe this to people, but it looks like it's like voluptuousness, right? Like there's a way that it be the car, and of course with those cars from the era, like a 58 Fury, right? It had the curves, right? It has like the, the chrome is all curved out and everything else. um and it's playing some song. I can't remember what song, maybe somebody knows in the chat, in that moment, that again is like a 50s song, but it has like a little bit of a like romantic or sexual kind of overtone to the lyrics and the song itself. It's very syrupy, but yeah, so it's anyway. Yeah.
So how it was done, and I watched a thing on this years ago, and I had to like look it up to remember. They used internally mounted hydraulics to basically make it expand. But a lot of it also is in reverse. So they would do things and they would put it in reverse, right? So like some of them you could notice, like when the window regenerates. That's like a clear one. That's a clear like reverse shot. But at that point, it's so expressionistic, like you go with it, like it's cool, right? Because it is a metaphysical happening. Like it can't actually happen. So basically, it's like returning to its past form. So in a way, Christine is able to like internally reverse time. But that's how they did it. It was like these hydraulics. They did some things with like rubber and actual like different types of metal plates and things like that. Everything that I saw, that it was incredibly complex, and it took a really, 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 really long time. And I think Carpenter said they actually had more footage than they actually ended up using. Right? He said there was so much that they ended up doing with that, and even the end scene that they didn't do it. So they said it was, but it was like really, really, really like amazing stuff. It was pretty elaborate.
Yeah, and very cool shit for the 80s. Like, because, it again, I mean, shout out to all the practical effects people and all the people who were doing visual effects and stuff like that in the 80s, like without fucking computers. And, it's very cool, and it looks amazing when you see it happen. And yeah, that was my sense, is like some of this just has to be where they reversed the footage. So you're watching something actually be compressed or destroyed, but because they reverse it, it makes it look like it's going from destroyed to fresh. But I'm sure, like you said, there was other, elements of this, of hydraulics and other things. But yeah, really cool sequence that way.
So this is where you begin to get the murders, right? And what's his name, the chubby they always have the chubby friend. Right,
his name is Moochie, which is a very like fitting for the chubby friend,
right? But then also there's like the idea that he's kind of working class, like he's hitchhiking or maybe or something with like in a pickup, not pickup, whatchamacallit, what kind of car? What kind of truck is that? Oh my god, my brain's not remembering. It's like a freight, like not a freight. You know what I'm talking about.
A semi or whatever.
A semi. Right? Yeah, it's a semi. So he's like he gets out of it, and he has a sense he's like walking under a dark bridge, and he sees in the long, he sees a car. He knows he after a while he knows it's Cunningham, right? And he's like, Cunningham, is that you? And then like the beams go on. And he's in this like mad dash, trying to run away from the car as it's like moving, like, and it's moving like pretty insanely, right? And he has to run away from the car in various kind of ways, to the point where he gets. I mean, I have to say, I wouldn't say this scene is scary, but it's fucking intense, right? Where he is in basically a kind of area that's like cut off, like the car can't get through, and there's a
It's
like a
yeah,
gate.
it's like a small loading dock
Loading dock,
essentially,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
it's like for maybe a forklift, so it's not designed for like a wide vehicle, which Christine is very wide, right?
Right. And
But
cars, the other thing to remember is cars back then were
yeah,
wider, right?
for
Like,
sure.
I remember like living in Europe, and there was, and I was like, see, like, cars would go through, like in Spain you can only get through like the small little areas, and they were like, yeah, that's why we can't have American cars here, because they're so fucking big, or especially older American cars. But so he's in there, right, and the guy takes out his knife, like, yeah, you know what, Cunningham, I'm gonna come fight you. But that don't mean shit. The car squeezes in, and it's like, it kind of goes in, and they really get the sounds going up in there, and you're like, oh shit. I remember when I first saw this, I was like, because I don't know why I didn't assume. I was like, what's gonna happen? Is like the car gonna shoot some beams or something? I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, is it gonna piss fire? It does that later. But no, it actually just fucking goes in there and it rams dude, right? It just goes right into him, and it's pretty fucking intense. They really gotta go in there, and it's this, this is where the movie gets interesting, also in the idea of vengeance and the get back, right? Right, because if you think about like Karate Kid, which we did a couple of weeks ago, how they do like they try to make like make the get back a kind of thing that we cheer for. But in this, they kind of play with it. I'm not saying that people don't cheer for the get backs in this. I know plenty of people do. And I probably do a little bit at times as when I watch it. But there is a grotesqueness that you have to begin to associate yourself with, that I think anybody will acknowledge, whether they'll like accept it or not, by seeing how these get backs go. Like, it's definitely made to be like excessively brutal, and like basically you've now aligned yourself with a killer car, right? And a killer manifestation that wants to like not only like, get back at these people, but like literally end their lives.
Yeah. And it is interesting in the respect of, if you read what happened to Christine as a sexual assault, then you know then yeah, like getting back in this kind of vengeful way um is something I like you. I actually cheer for Christine through this part of the movie, because fuck these guys at this point. But at the same time, like you said, it is quite brutal. And this one in particular, I find, because also, like you said, it's through the sheer power, right, of her motor that she's able to kill it, because she has to rip off the entire both sides of the body of her car in order to like force the front of her car to crush this guy. And as they describe it later, in the next one of the next scenes, the detective, says they had to scrape his legs off of the pavement. And this is when Arnie says, well, that's what you do with a shitter, or like, yeah, with some shit, right, as you scrape it up off the pavement, or you scrape it off with a shovel. And that somebody, Robin Drake in the chat, I think, said, they use the term shitter a lot, and that's true. And it's that way in the book a lot. And I had to kind of look up to, like, is that actually a term that people use? And I guess it was to some extent, but it's very popularized within this book and the movie. And it goes back in the movie to even the first time that they meet LeBay, he uses the term. And I'm trying to remember what exactly he says with it, but um let's see if I can find it. He said he calls Dennis a shitter, and saying, you don't think you don't know half as much as you have. You don't know half as much as you think you do, shitter, I think is what he says to him. But this has now become a part of Arnie's like vocabulary, and it's also connected now. And I think in the book they do this as well, with the defecation on the dashboard of Christine. It becomes like this connective tissue, obviously, the term literally sort of meaning like the people who would do something like that, those are the shitters, and he's just like death to them, basically. So yeah.
I mean, and that's like one of the things about vengeance movies. And I think I forgot where I said this. I was talking. Maybe I said it on one of our streams. I mean, it is the inherently, I think, conservative end of the vengeance film, because the vengeance film, what it does is it takes real world issues and it says the way to solve them is through like finding some mode of sheer force to basically get your get back. And because you were wronged, you are essentially justified in get back to a certain degree, depending on the movie, at whatever level that you can. Some movies even justify it that if there's collateral damage in terms of other people, you're justified, right? You know, like think about things like Lethal Weapon or something like that. They steal his daughter, they kidnap his daughter, right? In Lethal Weapon, right? And or Lethal Weapon 2 when they kill the other cops. So they're now justified in creating like calamity around Los Angeles, you know, in multiple movies, you know, to basically get back at these people. So it's not just that they're drug dealers, they're drug dealers that did some shit to him, or Riggs, they kill the woman that he likes, you know, like that he's into, or historically killed his wife as well too. So like they add these things into it, right? So it's really, 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 really interesting when you begin to kind of situate it even within this movie, right? Because then Arnie then goes to see Dennis, and Dennis is still in the hospital, right? And he brings him like a bunch of beer, right? And like he's, you know, he's like drinking the beer, right? And you could definitely see like Dennis is like disturbed by Arnie, right? He's very disturbed by Arnie. I mean, he's like James Dean if he was also the Prince of Darkness, right? Like it's vampire James Dean or zombie James Dean or some shit, right? I forget the lines in the sequence, right? But I think he does ask him about, did you hear what happened to Moochie? Right. And isn't this the line that he says about like the shit or something like that? Or does he say that later? I can't remember.
No, that's to the detective.
Harry Dean Stanton, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean he's in this sequence with, and you begin to see Dennis start to kind of recognize that like Arnie has definitely hit another level. And you also have the kind of idea at this point that Dennis knows that Christine is not what it seems, right? Is definitely a bit more than what like meets the eye. So the next part is when Harry Dean Stanton comes in and he begins to question him at the school, right? And talking to him about, well, he starts it off with like the car, yeah, about the car being totaled, right? And he asks him like, like how did it get okay? And like, he says it wasn't as fucked up as it said. And he tries to like show him like, yeah, the paint's off and all this type of shit.
Yeah. So I mean, the character's name is Detective Rudolph Jenkins. Like you said, Harry Dean Stanton's is an actor. Again, another great character actor that's in the film. And yeah, no, he's investigating the murder, obviously, of Moochie, but he raises questions. And it's funny that like nobody else ever raises really before this point too, of like, this seems really strange how easily and quickly and well you're able to restore this car. And then obviously it's heightened now because she's just been totally destroyed. And Lee saw that. And Lee has talked to people, right? So Lee has talked to Dennis about this, and she's talked also to detective here. And so he's kind of like questioning him, and basically Arnie is again like he's so confident in this phase, right, that he's like super antagonistic to this whole discussion, and he's basically like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But at the same time, he's like, what, is it a crime for me to fix up my car, kind of thing, and all of this, and tries to drive off at one point, like gets in the car, like revs the engine really loud with the car right in front of it, with the cop right in front of him, like he's gonna run over the cop, but he doesn't, of course. He gets out, talks to him, but um, basically, and has this discussion with the detective bringing up, like we heard one of the the guys who was killed, like, defecated on the dashboard, right? And that would really bother me. Didn't it bother you, kind of thing? And he's sort of like, you can just wipe it off. It's not a big deal. Is like the way that Arnie plays it. And then that's when he brings in, I think that, what happened to Moochie and that they had to wipe him off of. And he's like, well, that's what you do with shit. And he says that like about the guy who's just been killed, right? So it's also like kind of wild in terms of how bold he is, even with the police, right? And the kind of power and he's feeling in this moment, which relates, I think, to what you were saying earlier about the scene with him and his father too.
Yeah. Yeah, or like even like the final part when he's in the car, and he's like revving up, and like Henry Dean Stanton's like in front of him, like he's like revving up the car, and it's like he's like, damn, is motherfucker about to hit me with his car? Like he's a little like taken aback, right? Which then goes right into like the next big, like very famous scene where basically oh no. The next sequence is him calling Lee, right? He tries to get back with Lee. Lee's like, you know, I care about you, but kick that car to the curb, right? Like get it away, right? And he's frustrated. So that then prompts like the next big sequence where Buddy and one of the last remaining guys of it, he goes to the other guy's garage eventually, is like they're like hanging out on the street, and in the car, and they start driving off and they're being followed, like big bright lights, and Buddy, he think he the tough dude on the road, tries to like challenge the car, but then you realize it's Christine, and he's basically gets into this like, back and forth with the car on the road.
Yeah, he like he's like, oh, we'll back up on it, and she's backing up exactly at the same speed.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I do quite like how the car shit is filmed in the film. It's like what's wild about the Christine car, it's so reckless, like the way it drives. And it was actually the person who drove the Christine car was like a boxcar driver. They got like an actual, like someone who did that kind of like real like boxcar driving. So someone who could really give it that kind of like, all out crazy vibe. Right. And like, so like, Buddy's basically being chased, and you see in the other guy in the car, he's looking a little bit. I always remember him because he's in
Rich
Ghostbusters.
Is the other guy's name.
Rich. Yeah, I always remember him because he's in the opening scene in Ghostbusters. One of the opening scenes when Venkman is doing the test. He's the guy who's getting like constantly zapped, right? I always remember him from that sequence. But yeah, they do the shit. I mean, it goes in there, and then it basically goes towards a gas station where the other guy is driving, and he's like, someone's following me, right? And and it's crazy because like they never really get that this car's coming to kill them. They just think it's kind of fuck with them because like they're just like sitting at the gas station a little nervous, and when they see the car coming, they're like, "Oh, the car's coming!" And the car just like doesn't just come; it literally crashes Buddy's car and goes right into the shit, right? And causes like a big ass, gasoline to leak and all that, and basically explodes the entire thing. Right, where one of the guys, both of the other guys gets hit with the car first, I think. Not Buddy, one of the other guys. The other guy gets like blown up in the explosion. And then you get the famous, burning Christine car, which so many horror movies have stolen. The burning Christine, I've seen this shot in so many like really shitty horror movies. Like, I'm like, stop it. It's not as good, right? Like, you don't do it as good, right? And it's like kind of like the car going down, and it's interesting because Buddy is on like foot, and you don't see the impact, you just kind of hear it, and then you just see Buddy under it, like as like flamed, right, and it just goes over him. And it's interesting to do that because they don't make a big deal out of it. It's like, yeah, fuck Buddy, right? Like it's just like. You don't even get like the triumphant death. Like, you fucking with Christine, bro. Like Christine's on a level that you can't even understand, you fucking whack ass bully.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's important, right? Because there could be a version of this, movie where Buddy is like kind of the main, villain or whatever, given the way that he and his friends have treated both Arnie and Christine, but that's not the way that the story evolves. And the ending is different between the book and the movie significantly, but I don't think that that plays a factor within the difference, if I remember correctly. But anyway, we'll get to that when we get to the ending. One thing I just want to say in passing on this too quickly is like I love the visual effect. It's not even an effect. I think it's just what happens when the headlights aim straight at a lens and then it captures on film, that you get this like blue line that comes across, and like
Yeah.
it's in different parts of the movie.
So he probably, I mean, for people who don't know or maybe even know cameras, also particular lenses get those effects. Typically anamorphic lenses, not just anamorphics, but just different calibrations of different lenses a lot of times. So they were definitely using, because I don't know if it's an anamorphic. I'd have to look at the I have to go back and look at the actual lens flare, right? So different lenses get more flare out. I'd have to look at the whatchamacallit, the aspect ratio to be able to tell in it. But yeah, definitely. And people obsessed with lens flares after that. I mean, like, it's Michael Mann's favorite fucking thing in the world. Yes, exactly. It became an obsession as years went on. Anybody who shoots movies at night a lot, the lens flare, it becomes a thing. But it's really well done in this. So yeah, like it goes back. So basically the car goes back to Darnell's. And this is an interesting thing because then Arnie's not in the car when it goes back. So I've always been left with like two thoughts. Either it dropped Arnie off or Christine did this second one on its own.
I think Christine did both of them on her own.
On their own? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I like the ambiguity of it. Like they don't ever really say, because then later you get Arnie is in the car at the end, right? When it goes to kill. But it's interesting, right? Because you never quite know, actually. But except for this one, it's easy. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And I think it's like one of the things that they like, kind of like lift out. Like, does it drop Arnie off? Like, at what point does Arnie? But then Arnie clearly also knows that Christine is doing it.
He may have been there, actually, now that I think about it. Like, because in the book he would have been there. I'm fairly sure, because in the book he's the one who's possessed. Like, and so Christine is just like the sort of passing vehicle for LeBay to move from LeBay's spirit into him being possessed by LeBay. But in the movie, of course, Christine is her own kind of demonic force or whatever. And so, yeah, I always kind of assumed that she was solo on those, but you may be right. She could have been present for those, but you're right. She's obviously dropped off in this scene.
Yeah. So the next part though is like, the when they kill Darnell. So the car's like jacked up, right? Darnell's like, what the hell is like driving in here? Has like the gun out, get out. Da, 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 da. He's not assuming this car is driving itself, that somebody has driven up in there. And he goes in, right, to the car, right? It's all fucked up. And then, Darnell is like, I'm gonna go sit in the car, right? And then does like the seat thing and it like crushes Darnell and kills him. And yeah.
Well playing Boney Maroney.
Which is, and that's one of the
Boney Maroney.
And that's like one of the funny parts where it's like this like sadistic distancing, right? You're like, what the fuck, right?
Right, because the line is, she's as skinny as a stick of macaroni or whatever, and it's as it's crushing him, right? Like, yeah.
It's like, oh man, and Christy got a weird ass sense of humor with killing people, right? And then they juxtapose. So then, like, the next cut scene is Arnie coming from work, coming to go to work with his parts, right? And with that, goes in and he's like, he sees Harry Dean Stanton and the cops, and they're looking over, and they let him know that Darnell was killed in the car, right? But also the car is also regenerated at that point too, so it's also back to being, it's no longer like smoky, it's like red, back to like being the regular Christine, right? And yeah, so Arnie, he's pissed off. He definitely shows like no remorse for Darnell being dead. You don't really give a fuck. Like he's definitely totally like far gone, and he's at that point, and so you now knowing the movie's gonna start to come to an end. And you then get Lee. I think it's Lee that calls Dennis, right? Lee calls Dennis, and she's like, I want to talk to you about Arnie. And they basically get together and basically start talking about the car, right? And like that the car's a fucking problem. And he tells her the stuff about like, it killing the daughter of the original owner, and they begin to put all the pieces together. And I do find it interesting that, and maybe he didn't do it, and I wonder if the book does it. I don't know. You can tell me how the book is, that they don't essentially have them get together, though they're kind of like they become they become connected in trying to save Arnie, but they don't really like super establish a kind of romantic kind of like switch off into the two of them. Maybe it's implied in like her kind of thought, but I don't see an explicit way of like now saying they're now going to be together outside of in this moment, like in their drive. I don't think they're trying to save Arnie in destroying Christine, which I also find an interesting thing about the ending of the film is like, I do think saving Arnie is secondary, destroying Christine is primary for both of them. Right. And I think maybe in destroying Christine, they could save Arnie, but like they have to destroy Christine is like now the project.
Yeah. So they do. So the way that it's dealt with in the book is that they're together, but they don't consummate their relationship. This is the way that it's, framed until college, right? But they also don't stay together long term, which is, I mean, who cares? But Stephen does. This is the thing about Stephen King. He writes way too fucking much. Like he puts in stuff. His books are way too long. As my high school English teacher used to say, he's interesting, but he needs a good editor, right? Like this is the thing with King. And so he adds in all these details that you actually don't need or don't really care about, but they do break up eventually, like years down the line, basically.
So you get this sequence. So she comes out of the house with Dennis, right? And she's like tries to hard because then you see Christine come around with Arnie to pick up Dennis, right? And now you have in my household one of our favorite scenes, the sequence with the car where he's driving Dennis around and they're drinking beer, and
So they drink Southern Cross, which is a
yes,
fake beer.
what
by the
is
way.
that? It's a fake
No,
beer.
it's fake.
I was okay.
Yeah,
I was
which is
wondering.
like, I mean, there's references. We should pull them up because Southern Cross is a specific reference, obviously, and there's the whole Confederate connection to the idea of Southern Cross and all that. But it's not a real beer, which I thought is interesting, right? It's like no product placement really within the film at all,
How they didn't want to spend
Which
the money.
Yeah, could be, but it could also be Carpenter maybe have been like, fuck that shit. Like we're not doing commercials for Budweiser here.
So Crosby, Stills, and Nash has a song called Southern Cross.
Yeah.
And I also remember Southern Cross. I mean, I don't know. I would have to figure it from Fist of the North Star. There's also the Southern Cross in that, which is an interesting thing because they use a lot of like European things, constructions in that, which is so it's interesting. I'd be very curious to look that up.
It has like a broader meaning too within like astrology, like it's a constellation.
Yeah.
Like in the sky. So yeah, but
that would make sense that would make sense for Fist of the North Star because that's all about the constellations and Kenshiro and all of them being Jerry the Damager used it, dynamic opposites, form and oblivion, substance and chaos. So yeah, that actually makes sense for that. Okay. So now you get the really, big famous scene where they're like driving off, right? And like I did quite love this. I love this scene. It's so good because like Dennis is so stupid. Like he gets it, but he doesn't like get it with it, right? So they're in the car and they're having this conversation, and like clearly Arnie is like telling him about you know where he is in life at this moment, right? And he's like, drink the beer, do all this stuff. And he's showing him stuff. He like basically takes his hands off the wheel. He's kind of like showing him like the levels of shit with like Christine. And like Dennis is trying to like have this like appeal with him, right? And they're kind of going through this conversation and they're so then Arnie says this like thing that I think is just really, really poignant. And I'll read the lines when he says, "Let me tell you a little something about love, Dennis. It has a voracious appetite. It eats everything. Friendship, family. It kills me how much it eats. But I tell you something else. You feed it right, and it can be a beautiful thing, and that's what we have." When someone believes in you, man, you can do anything, any fucking thing in the entire universe. And when you believe it right, and when you believe right back in that someone, then watch out, world. Nobody, because nobody can stop you, then nobody ever. Then Dennis says, "You feel this way about Lee?" Arnie goes, "What? Fuck no. I'm talking about Christine, man. No shitter ever came between me and Christine." And that sequence to me, like, that shit works like when I watched that sequence, because what I've always liked about it is that it just shows a kind of way that people think about love that I do think is very real. That they see love as this kind of like activator for even any kind of individual quest that one has. Like the highest level of love that you could find is a love that would justify you being a fucking bastard, right? Like the concept of a real one, right? Like Christine's a real one, right? You know what I'm saying? Because like, you know what? These dudes fucked with me. And you know what Christine did after they even fucked her up? She killed him. That's the realest woman there is, right? Like,
ride or die, right?
Right. She is the ride or die, like defined, right? Like, and like the way he even says, Christine, man, like the way he's found a level of love that, like, also you'll never understand. Like, humans can't do this love. Like, the car and this car can do a level of love that you will never get, right? Fuck sex. Who needs sex? I have roaring engine that can literally blow up a gas station and run over somebody in flames.
Yeah, and to go back to Ferris Bueller that we did last month, right? This is the way that Cameron's father feels about the Ferrari, right? He doesn't even drive it. He just goes into the garage and rubs it with the diaper. Like that's it, right? And I think that, yeah, I mean, sadly, I do think that there is a place within American, culture, pop culture, what is inculcated to people to have that kind of love for as and I do think I do think this has changed a little bit. Like, I think there's so many things nowadays that, like, I don't feel like cars take on quite the same level as they did in the 80s or the 70s, right? Or earlier decades, where it was like other than your house, right? This is the most important, purchase or thing that you're going to own, right? And it I mean, I guess I'm sure it still does for a lot of people, but I think that, it was supposed to say something about who you were, the type of car that you drove, right? And similarly, yeah, like the idea, like Christine is the trophy wife, right? In a certain kind of way, is the way that it's put together in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the trophy thing is big, and it's like but what would the trophy do for you? And that's where I find like the psychology of the film very interesting. Like, but like I said, like the chaos of it could get people to the wrong conclusions, because like someone who doesn't have a moral or a kind of like a sense of self that would critique that could like really love this shit. They're like, fuck yeah, man. I want me a Christine.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, like as a kid, when I read this and encountered this movie, I did not come away with any like that there was any deep critique of really anything about America. Like it
No.
wasn't, you know. which, yeah, I mean, if you watch it with just a little bit of analysis, you can see it, but it's very easy for you to just watch it at a kind of like phenomenal or epiphenomenal level. Just look at like what's happening on the surface of the film
Yeah.
and just or read the book on just what's happening on the surface and just walk away with it. And actually a lot of fairly toxic shit I think is
Yeah.
transmuted through those versions of it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, but I think that's the problem when you approach things with nihilism, right? Because I do think Carpenter is making an expression, and I think he has a correct way to kind of finger point the degraded parts of society, but he's not entering it from a place with any other kind of project on the other end of it, or really wanting to give people a kind of understanding of the totality, right? He doesn't really, and I always say, like, as much as I like Carpenter, that's always like, why would that doesn't want to that's not that's what has always kept him from being a really like socially super engaged filmmaker, right? He does operate from a particular kind of cynicism, right, and a particular kind of nihilism about society overall. Like he sees the world as a kind of like defeated place, right? Which is, I think, is a lot of his generation, right? In general. So like after that sequence, right? He's driving, and basically Dennis is like, yeah, this dude done lost his mind. You get he basically carves into the you see him in the parking lot into Christine Darnell's like tonight or something like that, meaning like, we'll see you at the garage tonight to basically do like a final showdown. So you get the final showdown with it, and you get Lee and Dennis together. They're basically going to go confront and find a way to like destroy the car. So they're in Darnell's. They have they have like a forklift, something that's bigger than Christine, and they go into like the whole big like final fight sequence, and like they're waiting for the car. Unbeknownst to them, of course, the car is actually already there, and it drives out, and you get this final like showdown with like the forklift and the car, and with like Lee. They do their best to like make it like super exciting. I don't think it's like the most exciting ending ever, right? It's like kind of hard to make a forklift in a car the most exciting like fight. But I do credit Carpenter as a filmmaker. He's able to, with his shot selection and like mood and like lighting, able to provide enough which is probably why he doesn't love the film. He probably disappointed in himself. He couldn't find a way to make it like brutally scary. But I was like, no, I'll give you credit, bro. You did your best with what, the limits of the story can actually do. And you make a nice, like, tense thing. But one of the things that happens early is when the car wants to go after Lee, Arnie just flies out the windshield, right? And you get an earlier shot where you see Arnie in the car too, and his eyes are like degraded. So you kind of get this sense that he's like becoming more one with the car and like losing his humanity, right? So he flies out the windshield, and he's like some glass in his chest, and he dies. And it's funny because, and this is something that I find interesting about the movie also, and I think this might think about Carpenter's thoughts around vengeance, is that he doesn't. Yes, you get a serenade song from Christine for Artie in death, but he doesn't get like a death that feels tragic in the like lead. The tragedy you normally get for lead characters is actually almost like a tragedy level that you get for the villain who fucked up, right? In a way, Arnie actually becomes the villain at the end of the movie. So there's like a switch where he is the villain. And I actually find that a compelling, thing. And it kind of shows you his kind of overall thoughts around vengeance and his, and what it will actually do to you if you kind of go down that route.
Yeah, and I do think this is where there's an interesting critique, right? Because I do think it's like if you succumb to this American commodified culture where the car, like it will destroy you, right? Like this is a destructive culture. It is a nihilistic one in which, you bind your idea of humanity and love up with a commodity, right? And up with a vehicle, right? An inanimate object and all of this. And that it fundamentally leads him to this place, as he does say in his last discussion with Dennis, where like basically everybody's a shitter, right? Like it's like it's like the Holden Caulfield kind of vibe of just like being just totally all out on your own, and the kind of nihilism of that. And actually Arnie is a very Holden Caulfield-esque character in a lot of ways. There's a very Salinger, JD Salinger kind of mood to his portrayal here. A couple of things. So there's some differences between the book and the movie that are significant here. So in the book, because Arnie is possessed by LeBay, there's a separation of like the kind of final confrontation. So Arnie is actually battling for his soul against LeBay and dies in the process, but dies in a process of trying to like recover his own humanity from this demonic possession kind of thing. And Christine does battle against Dennis, but there it's like a tanker truck, right, that he uses to destroy Christine. And it's separate in that way of Christine is not like, in a certain way, what's interesting about Carpenter here is that, yeah, Carpenter basically presents both Christine and Arnie as totally irredeemable. Christine perhaps more so, right? Because they're like destined to just destroy her so she can't do this to more people, because we know the history of her in doing these things. Whereas because King in his version sort of separates the issue of possession from being like innately tied to Christine, it is a weird kind of way that it's all dealt with. Um, because they still attack Christine. Like I don't know. I'm not even sure the King's is that. Like I feel like it's even a little bit more chaotic and nonsensical in certain ways. But there is still the possibility within King's work of redemption for Arnie, whereas there isn't here. And the way he dies is really kind of interesting to me in this. I mean, because again, like Christine is trying to run down Lee within the office, and he's sort of like thrown out of the car, essentially, like I guess through the windshield and into the office. And he's like kind of lunging at her, and then is stabbed by glass, and it like kills him. But there's like sexual kind of release kind of sounds and stuff like that, right? And so it's like sort of this weird, like he's finally really, achieved some sort of sexual release, but it's like in his death. And it's strange the way that he's dealt with at the end of the movie, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I've always had a sense also, because like one of the interesting things is, if you think about Christine is supposed to be the protector of Arnie, why wouldn't Christine then like make Arnie put on the seatbelt in that moment, right? So there's also this, I think, suggestion that it's like kind of like the trope that like it really isn't about Arnie. It's about Arnie gave Christine the opportunity to have like a further activation of self also. So they need it. So then in the end, Christine can go get another Arnie. Arnie is not that important, right? So it's like the vengeance that they want on Lee, and they want to kill Lee, right? And they want to use Arnie to kill Lee because Lee is also another person that, represents someone that defied Christine, right? That's the most important thing. So if Arnie got to die in the fucking process, who gives a fuck? Right? Right? Like who could, I'll find another Arnie. I'm fucking Christine. Understand that? Like,
Yeah.
which then like adds at the end when it gets crushed, right? Like the only way to like, destroy Christine is actually to like literally crush it. And then even then, is it
Yeah.
really destroyed?
Right. And that scene too, with when they're in the bulldozer, the caterpillar, right? And they're driving. And it's like that is also, I feel like, even though it's cars, his vehicles is very sexualized
Oh
again, right? From
yeah.
mounting and like constantly like going back and forth and all of this until she's finally completely subdued. Yeah, anyways, there's a lot of sexual frustration in this movie and also in the book from King.
Yeah, tons, and it's I remember it does bring me back to in college when I used to watch it with some people, and they're like, "Yeah, I do remember that commentary from people like, oh, this is a very sexual movie,' and I remember like the kind of like college age 19, 20-year-old men and women like, when we're in that kind of period of like discovering ourselves sexually, this is a movie that people really wanted to watch, and it had that kind of like displacement of like that anger, or and that frustration towards dating and what you're forbidden from, who you can have, who you can't have, who you want to crush as your competition, right? And this is like a thing that can be activated, I think, whatever gender or sexual orientation, right? Like that idea of like the competitor, I need to crush them, or they kept me from what I wanted, so now I'm gonna fucking destroy him, which is like these things I think within the Americana that are very, 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 very big. Not just in America. I'm sure it's in all things, but like in America, they definitely use that a lot. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's a very in that sense, I think the film does speak to, yeah, a real toxicity that just exists within, certainly American culture, but also like just patriarchy more broadly to like this idea
mhm.
of ownership and like she's got to be mine. She has to play this kind of role for me. Um, the instrumentation, I do think that's one of the interesting things about Christine, like being a girl, being named a girl, and having is that in certain ways they can both King and Carpenter can use the concept of the car to talk about these like really fucked up dynamics in a certain, in a way that uses a metaphor essentially to do so. But it's also one of those things again where and you and I have talked about this with a number of these films. It's like, does the critique work if not everybody is going to get it, and if you can as much have your own toxicity kind of fed or cultivated by something like this as it could be like debunked, or like it's not, I don't feel like the critique is even maybe harsh enough. It relies upon people to really understand and be able to think about what's going on within it critically rather than just read it at that kind of surface level. And yeah.
100%. I don't think it does. I wouldn't. I'm not a person. This is what I deal with, like in film studies. I'm not a person who believes if I want to show a film that has a real discussion about masculinity, so forth and so on, I'm not going to show them Christine. I'm not. If I'm doing a film studies course that talks about 80s movies, I would definitely show this film in an effort to show like what the kind of zeitgeist was and how it was like basically essentially what we're doing here, like sputtering, fucking up, maybe getting a few things somewhat accurate, but not going too far. What were the limitations, and also just like the mood. And I think if we really talk about the mood, is that I think at this point, and I always want to stamp this home, even people like Carpenter, who probably had in a kind of working within the Hollywood system in first and second cinema, right? Like had a good read. He was so overly consumed by nihilism that a stronger political read wasn't something he was ever going to really grab. So where he's doing something well, he's not going to like, because the thing about like when you're that cynical and nihilistic, your project becomes a kind of a self-serving one, right? You're not really trying to communicate with an audience as much as you're trying to like wrap the audience within the soup of whatever you're trying to put in there. So whatever happens and wherever people are at their particular ideological place, they're just gonna go, right? You're not really taking, honestly, like the real, I think, really strong effort of guidance that's needed, right? And so, yeah, so whatever, if someone has a really big toxic relationship with their car, they're not going to get better after watching Christine. Trust, they're probably going to be either stay the same or get a little fucking worse. Yes. Will there be a moment that someone will watch Christine and go, shit, man, that's some wild shit. Let me think about my life a little bit. I'm not saying that can't happen, but that's conjunctural. You know what I'm saying? It's always because of a multitude of happenings. The movie, when people say that, like, I'm not trying to like discount anyone's experience. I think people need to take more into account that it's a multitude of factors. It wasn't the fact that I went and watched RoboCop and now I'm suddenly realized, corporations are bad. No, you were kind of getting there already. And then something in RoboCop did it. Because if that was the case, everybody who watched RoboCop, and no, not everybody does it. Some people watch RoboCop, but they just like the fact that they seeing guns, guns, guns in the movie, and that's all they give a fuck about, right? Or they maybe want to be still an OCP or whatever, So that's the thing.
Yeah. So the last little stretch is that then like you get this scene where Christine is finally like totally crushed in a junkyard right into like the classic sort of cube that people are probably used to seeing after some car's been smashed totally down. And there's a guy walking by. Well, they don't know this, so they hear a song. And then they see, and it's three of them, right? So it's the cop at this point. Um, and then it's also Lee and Dennis. The three of them are together, and it's kind of a funny thing. Like, um, the yeah, the last song that Christine's playing before she dies is also "Rock and Roll Will Never Die," which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But they're talking about they feel bad, right? That about I mean, and this is like so. I will say this was one of the scenes where I was like, this is kind of underacted right here. Like, like Arnie is fucking dead, right? You all have just been through a wild traumatic experience. People have been fucking getting run down by this car left and right. Your whole world, like Dennis has been through a major injury. Like you all have been through a lot. Lee, you just almost got killed by a car and then almost killed by Arnie, right? And you're like, oh yeah, man, I feel bad about Arnie. And the detective just says, I wouldn't feel too bad if I were you. You two are heroes. Some things can't be helped. Some people too. And they're like, yeah. Like he's just beyond reproach. So then that's when you hear the rock music, and it looks like it's coming out of the cube that's Christine. But there's like a junkyard worker in the background walking by with like a boombox on his shoulder. And Lee says, I hate rock and roll. Right. And
and that's no, and then you see
then it cuts in the cube,
yeah.
and there's like a little bit of a little twitch of a little bit of the chrome, and then Bad to the Bone plays on, but it's not supposed to be coming out of Christine. It's just like the end credits song playing.
Yeah. I mean, I always read that as like he wants to like he still wants it to be archetypal. He doesn't want you to kind of like engage in a kind of like deep emotional kind of resonance. He actually wants to like purposely like turn around, like distance you, because then it also then like sets up the joke, right? Which I find interesting. And to me, like it was that last line that says, "Oh, this movie is like really just basically a nihilism. Like I hate rock and roll," which is like even in the 80s. I mean, think about, was it Back to the Future is like the next year, right? And like rock and roll is like deified, right? Like like you and rock and roll through the 80s is like a deified thing, right? Is like as like the and she goes, I hate rock and roll, right? Like these like
yeah,
these
and it's supposed to
products.
be in the late 70s too, which I guess she could have been into disco, but there's so much fucking good rock in the 70s too. So yeah, I don't know.
Right, but it's yeah, and they but I think because when you juxtapose it, they purposely place it with a certain era of rock and roll.
Oh
Which I do
yeah,
think
like
it's
rock and roll is the 50s like era of
yeah,
rock and roll. Like they're not really
in the
talking about like
car.
all the yeah.
So,
It's
and if you think
yeah.
about that within like the kind of hagiography of the time, right? Of like being like the cornerstone of American cultural, output, within like of the Americana, like is basically like this. It's shit. It eats your kids. It destroys them, and makes them into it makes them into zombies that hunt down others.
Which I have to say I love because there's another thing that I fucking hated about growing up in the 80s was the oldie stations always playing that fucking 1950s like Buddy Holly, like I hated all of that music. And of course it was my parents' music, right? Which is I think probably part of why I hated it, right? Is like, like fuck the Beatles, man. Like I just hated that stuff. And I was really glad for the like kind of which I guess is very punk rock, is also hip hop, like all of that of just like this like we have to break with this classic. And I'm so grateful that we live in an era now where when you turn on the oldies stations, it's song from like the 80s and the 90s instead of the fucking 50s. Because I've had enough Buddy Holly in my life.
So what would they even call that now? The super oldies? Like what's the word? The classics? Classical?
Yeah, I don't even know, right? Because
Yeah.
they don't play it anymore on the radio. But when we were growing up, if you turned on one of those oldie stations, it was playing songs from the 50s and maybe the 60s. Like the most recent thing you were getting was like maybe a little Motown like sprinkled in, but it was a lot of like Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, the Beatles, early
Well,
Stones.
so
Yeah.
now I'm gonna have to ask you, are we doing La Bamba?
We do have to do La Bamba, but
We do have to do La Bamba.
yeah, we have to offend, we have to find somebody, we have to offend somebody's sensibilities and make them watch La Bamba with us.
Oh man, that movie. Oh man. Shout out Lou Diamond Phillips. And
I like
Issei
Lou Diamond
Morales.
Phillips a lot as an actor, even though that movie.
Issei Morales from NYC. Finally a Filipino star on Imperial Ladies. Playing a Mexican though. Playing one Mexican.
Didn't we have one in Goonies? No.
No, he's Japanese, right?
Oh, that's right.
Japanese or Chinese? I can't remember now. He's Japanese? I actually can't remember. Or Chinese. Sorry. Now I feel really bad.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Damn, that's terrible.
Yeah, well, we got more stuff coming up. I have some ideas
Chinese
for next week.
Right.
Yeah, Chinese.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we talked about it. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah, I know this is how bad we're getting. Like both of us are forgetting these things, but anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next Monday, folks.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else. I don't think. There's a couple of things in the chat I'll go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, Happy Days and Sha-Na-Na, Grease and all that kind of nostalgia stuff. Yeah, fuck all that. This is true. Yeah, Christine, Beverly Hills Cop, Karate Kid all use the same trope of going out way west, but the location changes from the book in this case. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and that was a thing. I think we might have talked about it. That there was an encouragement to set your films in LA. Like sometimes even you had to fight it. Actually, directors, they would be like, no. But yeah, there was actually an encouragement to like set your films in Los Angeles at that time.
Yep, and this one was interestingly because it's a fake place, but it is filmed in and around the Los Angeles metropolitan area. It says South Pasadena, Santa Clarita, and other parts of the San Fernando Valley. Interesting. All right, let's see what else we got. We got this was a term absolutely at my high school. Was it not for you, M2May?
Yes. Super seniors.
Oh, okay.
We happened all the time.
Yeah.
When I got to high school, they stopped using it because it was a derogatory term.
Well,
They
my
were
high
like,
school didn't give too much. We didn't care too much about derogatory terms in my high school.
no,
Um,
we would say it, but it was like
yeah.
a thing that like everyone would say it when I was a kid, like super seniors. But now they stopped saying it. So like to it was discouraging people from like graduating. They would like if they would like not graduate, they would just like
Yeah.
leave.
It's totally offensive. I mean, because the idea that like you have to complete high school within 4 years or else you're some kind of like deformed, you know,
Mhm.
that was the idea behind it. And yeah,
We
super
totally used it
senior,
though.
just so people don't know, super senior was a derogatory term to use for somebody who didn't graduate high school within 4 years. And so they were still at your school. And at least when we were going to school, kids were allowed to go to high school until they turned 21. And then after that point, they wouldn't allow them in, which the rationale that we were sort of given, I have no idea if this is true or not, was because they could fucking drink at that time. And they were like, we don't want kids that can legally buy alcohol just going
Yeah,
around with the other kids in high
that's
school
funny.
and it being like sanctioned by the state, essentially. I don't know if that was it at all, but so we had a number of kids that I remember, when I was in school who, were in their 5th year and their 6th year. And yeah, we're just a part of the student body. And sometimes, not always, like sometimes they were like really nice, cool people. Sometimes they were like the bullies, the kids that like part of the reason they might have had to have an extra year is because they got in fights and they got expelled for a year or something like that. And they got behind, schedule partly for disciplinary reasons. So,
Yeah, the majority of super seniors that I knew were people who had big home problems. Like they couldn't get to school. Like I had a friend, she did graduate though. But I remember her super senior thing was she just couldn't she was like taking care of her little sister. Like I remember she just couldn't like get to school enough days because we had a really big attendance thing. So I think she like missed the minute the whatever the maximum amount of time you could miss class.
yeah, I mean, and we had some of my peers at school, they had kids in high school. So like that was part
Yep.
of it too. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, let's see. Stephen King is not only disturbs, he needs to be sedated because well, someone's imagination when creating horror has to go to disturbed places. Some of his scenarios sound like fantasies of his. Um, and yeah, Stephen King having a girl be getting assaulted and it is an example too. Yeah, like there's a lot of I don't know. I mean, I don't like to get too deep into some of the like psychoanalyzing people, but I I don't know how people would write horror just for like a a living. Like it's, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't do it.
I
Let
hear
me just
you.
put it that way.
Mm-mm.
Um I didn't know this story that he was almost killed by a car and then having more than one vehicle related horror. That's interesting. This is true. This is a good point. In the States, we do have classic car meetups around, especially near patriotic holidays, very clean, old baby vehicles ready for cover shoots and the proud granddaddy's talking shop. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole culture around even these still the same kind of cars that Christine is, people who get together with like still these like 1950s, 1960s, vehicles and so on and so forth. And it is a very like kind of weird Americana subculture or whatever. Um, Never buy the vengeance will destroy you storylines. It's why I hate the ending of Carrie too. Yeah, I mean, I do think within this one there is a little bit of a yeah. I don't like that general trope either, um, because I generally think it's just a set of propaganda to like
Mm-hmm.
try to convince oppressed people that they shouldn't resist their oppression, right? Is like a lot of times kind of what it is. But um within this one, I think it's interesting because I don't know if the theme of this particular movie is that vengeance is the thing that destroys them. I don't
No, I
within
think it's the
Christine.
love for the commodity. I think
Yeah.
it's the fact that Arnie looks at the car as the greatest thing that life can offer, and it becomes the extension, and then the car's, you know, embodiment becomes basically like all of his values, and he basically like leaves humans alone. Yeah, I think something like Carrie to me has the same problem with something like Karate Kid. I think the issue is it's at the end of the day though, it's still a setup. It's why I, like the whole thing around vengeance, it's a large elaborate trick to not get you to actually look at the totality, right? That's why, or because even the alternative I think is a problem too. Like vengeance will like release you, then you get Django, and then you get Inglorious Bastards. I just think vengeance is such a limited scope, and yet they make it like like they make it the totality of like society, right? And it's like it's not a primary contradiction, right? It's actually, I don't even know if it's even secondary in that kind of way, right? It's like I think it's a conservative discussion, essentially, when you foreground it.
Foreground vengeance.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
when you foreground it. I'm not saying it's not a real thing, and people, yeah, but like and I do essentially agree. The idea of fighting back, they want to diminish so people don't do it. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like a form of nonviolence, like propaganda.
Yep.
It's yeah.
I definitely agree with that. 100%.
Yeah, pacification.
Pacification, right? Be a pacifist. Oh no.
So one thing I do want to say before we leave, because we do have to pick, I think we're going to do a movie next Monday as well, but I do want to just shout to folks for sure that next Friday, July 3rd. And so we will be doing, wait, am I right? Yes, that is right.
Next Friday.
So that date, we're going to be doing Blade Runner with Dwayne Monroe. So just prepare. If you need to do your rewatch, get it in the books now, prepare your stuff. Dwayne Monroe will be here. He already has his Padlet together with all of his notes for us on the Imperial 80s. Shout out to Dwayne, always like the most prepared guest. So I'm really looking forward to this. I love Dwayne, and I also think it'll be really fun to talk to him about Blade Runner in particular, and 80s sci-fi more broadly. And anyways, look out for that. Yeah. All right. I think that's it for me.
I'm done.
All right.
100%.
Thank y'all. Peace, everybody. Have a good week.